What's going on, you guys? It's your boy Patrick, aka Addicted to Combat, and we're back after that horrible week off. I miss doing these streams, and we get to do 6 in a row now with 6 consecutive weeks of UFC action. Starting with UFC Vegas 62, the women's flyweight main event with Grasso and Araujo. So I'm actually excited for that main event. It's pretty high level in my opinion, but I know what we have in the back of our mind. The lines have been dropped for UFC 280. That's really the darling pay-per-view, that's behind this fight card. But if we can't have that shiny fight card this weekend, at least we have a good guest for this week's live stream. And it's a guy I've got a lot of respect for. LiamPicksFights is a good following, and he's very detail-oriented, where even if I might disagree with, we all disagree at some point with each other's picks, I can still learn something from his analysis. So he's also not just a bettor, but a martial artist himself. So I'm going to pick his brain with a lot of the jiu-jitsu fighters on this card and see what we can glean some extra information off of our expert in the house here. So without further ado, here's LiamPicksFights. What's going on, brother?
What's going on, my man? It's an absolute pleasure to be on the show today, and I'm excited to break down these fights, man. It's been a hiatus, week after week. We're bouncing back and forth, and now we get that consistent UFC action for the next 2 weekends. I'm really looking forward to both these cards, so ton of great fights to break down. Happy to do it with you, my man.
I know it's been a little while. I know the first time we talked fights together, I was that fill-in guest in your stream. I think that was Pena and Nunes too back in the day. That was a fun one. We had a pretty good turnout for that card, and I think we both did pretty well on it too. So let me shout out the chat real fast. We had Jenna Marie from the Twitters in here, always a loyal subscriber and viewer here, super early. Same with Daz Files, 23 hours early. And see, look, this is a fight I really want to get to with you as well. Can't wait to hear Liam's thoughts on Malkoun Maximov. Got my homeboy in here, Cody from Blood Money MMA Bets. Got my guy, Effie from the Any Action Sportscast. We got No Love. Oh, yeah, here we go. Oh, yeah. Blood Money works the late shift, so he's at work listening to this. Hopefully we can keep him entertained, keep him awake on shift. But, man, Liam, we got 12 fights. I know right when I messaged you in the DMs, I'm like, this is a nice, manageable card. 11 fights, what a break. And then as soon as I sent that message to you, man, they added the Brito Alexander fight. I had to go in and do all the tape for that one. But, there's a couple really, easy to break down fights here, but there's a lot of violent spots. What are you most excited for in this card?
Man, I think, Brito has been a guy that I've really liked in that underdog role. I actually bet him in both of his UFC fights. So he's a guy I'm excited to see back. I'm glad that they found him a fight on the card. But as you know, I was celebrating the fact we only had 11 fights to break down as well. So Lucas Alexander is the guy I'm going to have to give a little bit more credit and respect to this week and figure out more about his game. But Joe Anderson Brito, the reason I liked him so much, he's a violent guy. He comes to bang. He can submit people. He can also knock them out with the hand. So he's a really violent fighter. I'm glad to see him back. And I actually think the prelims, have a couple really sneaky fun fights this week. I don't say that every week. Sometimes it's just sifting through the underbelly of the UFC, but they got a couple really good fights tucked away. A couple prospects I like. Taira. I think that he's a really clever grappler, really interesting game. So like to watch his stuff. And also Victor Henry. I bet on him. I believe it's the biggest betting underdog on the card against Raoni Barcelos. And Barcelos has been the biggest favorite on the card on a number of occasions. And, I kind of thought that I had seen some opening some downward trends. And Victor Henry is a guy who's really seasoned outside the UFC. So I think that he's another guy to watch this weekend in terms of guys on the come up, guys that are, really catching my attention.
Good steal on that one, because that was one that I fell for. I was big on Raoni Barcelos. I think I probably had him parlayed up or played him in some sort of way and lost on that one. That was an excellent showing from Victor Henry, and yeah, I like him on this card. So there's a lot of fights on this card that, obviously the lines are super inflated. I think the bookies did a very good job of setting some of the lines in this one where, it's kind of hard to go either way. And there's a couple spots I really want to talk to you about because sometimes if I think about a fight for too long, I just pass on it. You know what I mean? I shouldn't have. Usually these things just come to me when I'm doing my tape study. I see a clear price jump off the page on the bookies. And, if I have to think about it too long, sometimes I just pass. So there's a couple of those spots I'm going to see if we align or if we totally are in disagreement. But we start off the night with the most low-level fight on this card. Mike Jackson making his return. He's had a career in the UFC spanning 4 or 5 years now, believe it or not. And he's facing Pete Rodriguez, who's making his second outing in the UFC after losing that short notice fight to Jack Della Maddalena. Mike Jackson is now 37 years old. This is a 170-pound fight. Pete Rodriguez, a young 25-year-old. So Why don't you kick this one off, Liam, and tell me what you think about this? The line is set at -675 for Pete Rodriguez, Mike Jackson +500.
Yeah, I was pretty confident in Jack Della going into the Pete Rodriguez fight for a lot of the reasons that people are bringing up now when they talk about this fight. The fact that he hasn't really gone very deep into his fights, when he hasn't gotten the results he's looking for. So for Pete Rodriguez, there's a lot of open questions, a lot less experience than most guys you'd see in the UFC, but he did land a couple good shots, against Jack Della. He just was at a reach disadvantage. He was getting completely butchered at boxing range, and he likes to box. So, if you're way, way worse and way less equipped physically at the thing you're trying to do with somebody, that's tough. In this case, it's not a huge reach disparity, but the height disparity, it's going to function a little bit like a reach disadvantage. You'd have to think he's going to be reaching up for the chin a little bit more. He's going to have to chase the head. I think he'd be wise to go to the body of Mike Jackson, who's a little bit older, who's not all that invested in his fight career. He's got other things going on as well. But I think that this is an interesting fight because, we have those question marks about Pete. He's a massive favorite here. He's shown that he could definitely knock somebody out in the first round, but oftentimes it's not what we're seeing happen to Mike in his fights. But he's been fighting like this, there's like this parallel product that runs alongside the UFC that's just like every so often they just throw some guys in there. Like he was a photographer for the events and had fought Mickey Gall before and lost. So they're like, all right, we'll do the classic UFC matchmaking strategy. You both lost to the same guy. Now you guys fight. And he beat CM Punk, and the loser leaves.
That was like a raffle fight to see who fought CM Punk, was it not? At the time. So I was telling Gordo this on his stream. It's like we all have those moments as mixed martial arts fanatics where you're trying to show some friends who maybe just watch football or soccer, the sport that we are obsessed with, and we spend our every waking moment looking at. And I had to watch UFC 225. I bought the pay-per-view, had people over, and the first fight on that main card was Mike Jackson versus CM Punk. And to explain, this is what I spent my time watching. This is high level as it gets right here. So yeah.
That one was so bad in part because Mike Jackson, for whatever reason, wanted to prove a point by just like going the decision and just routing CM Punk. It's like, dude, if you really wanted to rout him, just take his back in the first round and let's all be done with this.
Do you think that was him proving a point? Do you think that was him secretly disguising his fatigue later in that fight? Because that's what it started to look like at certain points.
I mean, I think that when you're really not about this fight life, they say that activity is good for fighters because it keeps you with this level set. You're not as nervous, you're not as up for every fight. You say, I'm back here, I'm in the octagon, right. I do this every 4 months. But if you take a year, 2 years, 3 years, you might be like, what the hell am I doing in here? And I do think that that's a very plausible way that this fight plays out, is that Pete Rodriguez starts landing real punches and real shots on Mike Rodriguez, and he checks out and finds an early exit. But I also think that we don't really know how it's going to play out if the fight goes late. So with a bunch of unknowns, it should push the lines a little bit closer, towards 50-50. I think that for the intangible reasons, he's much younger. He's a lot more dynamic in terms of his athleticism. In terms of what I've seen from Pete Rodriguez, he does land big punches in his regional fights, but he's really never fought anybody of substance. The same almost could be said for Mike Jackson. The guys that he has fought of substance cleaned him up pretty quickly. Mickey Gall is no longer employed with the UFC. I think Mike Jackson might join him. Knockout round one, Pete Rodriguez.
Hopefully,
but I can't put any money behind that. No confidence.
That's at -140, I believe, round one KO for Pete Rodriguez. You're getting a method and a time prop for you got to pay to get something back.
Hey, chalk on Pete Rodriguez, who's going to be punching up, 6 inches or whatever. No, thank you.
Yeah. I like the time props on that. Could be something of interest, but yeah, you'd imagine Mike Jackson would have to weather the storm and then to win this fight later on. Pete Rodriguez, like you said, all 4 wins in his pro career, all of his wins as a pro are under 1.5. All of his 7 amateur wins, I believe, under 1.5 as well. But yeah, there's a lot of unknowns. So it's just a clear pass spot. But I think Gordo had an interesting one we just talked about an hour ago. I think he's betting on plus 160 fight starts round 2, which I thought was a little curious to say the least, but that's.
I don't hate that. 5 minutes for a fight to last. I don't think that that's beyond reason. And I will say, I said prior to the fight, I thought that if you were parlaying Dean Barry, you weren't paying attention. And I bet Mike Jackson for a small amount in his last fight. He was a massive underdog there. People were overhyping somebody that didn't have a lot proven behind them. So that's the reason why I could never get to a Pete Rodriguez money line play, parlay, anything like that. There's just not enough that I know about him, not enough proven to me at this level for me to invest at an 89, 90% indication. It's just crazy.
Yeah, it's insane. So we're on the same side of that one, but moving on to the next fight here. We got Tatsuro Taira taking on I'm sorry, who's he taking on here? CJ Vergara. That's right. So yeah, it's this is a really fun fight too, and this is one I wanted your opinion on. At flyweight, Tatsuro Taira taking on CJ Vergara, who's pretty green in the UFC, but he's at least 31 years old, got some some experience and age behind him, and I like to see that against a guy who's 22 years old, is Tatsuro Taira, and he's undefeated, 11-0, 8-0 amateur. Sometimes they need that loss. Sometimes those young guys need that little bit of taste that humble pie a little bit and go back to the drawing board and work on wherever they are lacking. But I don't think this is the spot. I think Tatsuro Taira is very high level, and you can speak. I'll let you speak on the BJJ. I really want to hear just how high level he is, but he looks like he gets in the flow state. He snatches up necks. He sets things up in advance, not just looking for one move he knows how to do, but, sort of sets up traps. And before you know it, he's climbing all over your back and setting up something nasty. So I like the unders in this fight because I haven't seen Tatsuro Taira actually I've seen CJ Vergara work his way back into fights. I've seen him use that forward pressure to break a prospect they were pitting him up against, his last fight against Cledson Rodriguez. He was able to, squeak out a split decision win that I think he deserved by working his way back into the fight, using that tenacity. Tatsuro Taira has not had to face that so much yet. So both guys are finishers, 6 knockouts out of 10 wins for CJ Vergara. 8 out of 11 wins. We're inside the distance for Taira. I like Taira to get the submission here. But instead of playing his money line, I'm taking the under 2.5 at plus money, plus 170. What do you think about that? And what do you think about the skill level of the 22-year-old Japanese fighter here?
Yeah, Tatsuro Taira is somebody that impressed me, before he came to the UFC. And part of what we do is really tricky, right? Because sometimes you look like an ass. You think that somebody looks really good on the regional scene and you're like, man, this guy has it. He's putting people away. He's doing this. And it's really hard to make those judgment calls. But that's what we're called to do because there's debutantes on almost every UFC card, right? So when Taira was making his debut, I have a habit of trying to go deep on the notes, and I had a pretty extensive notes history, and I was seeing, some commonalities in his fights, which was he was landing powerful punches. He was putting a lot of guys down. Granted, he wasn't fighting the highest level of competition, but he was fighting at a lot of credible regional organizations, Shuto, and a few other legitimate competitions. And he was going out there landing big punches, and he had great finishing instincts. And that stood out to me because one thing that you see a lot of guys struggle with in the UFC is putting people away. And then he proves that he can go out there and win a decision. He did it in his last fight. He's done that regionally as well. So when he doesn't get the quick finish, he was able to hold up. He was able to do the striking, do very well, look for takedowns, be opportunistic. And what I also like is, we've mentioned there's not a ton of adversity in his tape, but when there is adversity, he responds very well. He's working back to his own takedown. He's working to the deep half guard. He's not just, sitting in a position, accepting his fate. He's always working, moving, getting to the next spot. And I saw a lot of recovery. 22-year-old guy, younger than I am, right? Out there being tasked with, hey, go out there. We're going to have a fight this week. No, never mind. It's going to be in 2 weeks. It's like, so the guy's moved all around. He's in another country fighting for the first time. And he puts on that performance where he got a 30-26 on 2 scorecards. And to me, he looked utterly dominant for the most part. And he was taken off guard by the strategy of his opponent, right? You would think if you're, even I was a Tatsuro Taira backer that night quite extensively. I had a big bet on him because I was like, this kid is the goods. And Carlos Candelario is sick. He doesn't want to be at the fight. He's got a million other things going on. I think it was on short notice for it. Nothing was going right for Carlos Candelario. He looked like a ghost at the weigh-in. So I was like, I'm very invested in Taira. And I thought that he did a great job of responding to the bad positions. He had a back take that I still don't understand. I watched the tape 50 times where he falls to the guard and then just grabs his arm and he's on his back again. And I was like, all right.
I saw that.
Freaky stuff. So for me, I think that he's
impressive.
very high level. It's not all about belts. I think belts are important, but it's an eye test. And I'm seeing him do things that look special to me. His back taking is very high level. He was back taking, holding the guy's hands, looking at his coach. Oh, I should use ground and pound, ... And he starts punching. It's like he's very coachable. He's doing a lot of things right. He's 22, and he's got a lot of physicality. I think CJ Vergara is a good fighter. So I spent a lot of time on Taira. I'll be brief on CJ Vergara and just say I think he's a good fighter, but I don't think he's ready for a fight like Taira. I think Taira is going to be able to take him down if he wants to at any point in this fight. I've also seen CJ Vergara hurt in a lot of his fights. He has been hurt, dropped, rocked in the first round. And it's happened to him on a number of occasions. It happened to him regionally. In the regional title fight he won, he got dropped badly by Jacob Silva in the first round. And some refs might have stopped that fight. But he did a good job getting back into the fight. He's a tough guy. He's durable. He'll bring a lot of pressure. I just think that Taira can bail himself out with the takedowns if he needs to. I think that he's going to land the cleaner, bigger punches on the feet. I've seen Vergara eat 1,000,000 straight clean punches to the chin. The guy's very tough for doing that. That's not going to last forever. He's fighting a younger guy here with more physical dynamism. I think those are the things that are going to make the difference. I think the grappling edge is significant. I like Tatsuro Taira, and I agree with you. I think he gets it done by submission.
Yeah, I mean, Vergara is a guy who has a lot of great qualities, like we mentioned, especially that forward pressure and toughness for sure. But he struggles in the clinch. He struggles in the scrambles. And yeah, you mentioned Tatsuro Taira is not only coachable, but he's like very level-headed in there. He's not. You see a lot of these young guys that are undefeated, way too confident or way too nervous, and they go way too fast. He has got very good shot selection, very accurate with his punches, and yeah, he's coachable. So I like a lot of the qualities of him. Will there be a time to fade him? Maybe too big of a jump up in competition soon. For an undefeated guy, maybe, but for now, I'm just glad to see another Japanese prospect in there. We really need one. What do you think about the money line on this one? Right now, it's moved up to minus 250 for Taira over plus 200 Vergara. Do you agree with this money line? Do you think there is more? You think it could be like a minus 300 for Taira? Are you that confident, or do you think it's set about right?
Yeah, I do. Personally, I would line it a little bit higher. I think the books are respecting Vergara as an underdog. He's come through a number of times, that people are going to want to play a popular underdog that's been successful, that's had a lot of wins. And, I haven't really been betting against CJ Vergara. I think I even bet him potentially as an underdog on the Contender Series. So I've backed him in the past, but I think that this is a different fight. I bet the fight to end by knockout. That's what I bet with the Ode Osborne fight. And I was kind of surprised that he wasn't able to put him away in that third round when Ode was tired. I was also surprised that Ode didn't put him away in the first couple rounds when he was just, landing effortlessly, basically the 1-1-1-2 almost every time. So I think that those are the kind of things that eventually will catch up with Vergara. He brings a lot of pressure, but he eats a lot of shots cleanly. And I do think that I mentioned the finishing instincts. If Taira hits him and hurts him really bad, I don't think he's going to be, trying to land 50 ground and pound shots while the guy just zombies through it. I think he's going to just snatch his neck, and you can't tough guy a choke, you go to sleep.
Yeah, that's right. And the Taira sub is actually kind of a good value bet, I think. I think it's up there like, plus 300, I want to say. Maybe a little bit more.
I think it's even higher. It's even higher. And I might have to bet it now that we're talking about it.
Yeah, honestly, because it is. There are some really, really slick things that he does, and I think you're right on a lot of points there. I'm glad you're on that side so confidently because like you said, I do see a lot of people on the Vergara side, and I can see if you're looking on a paper, I can definitely see that. But if you watch them fight, as you mentioned, I mean, the eye test definitely goes into Taira's favor here. Shout out to Alex Ramirez taking notes, of course, man. Whenever LiamPicksFights is speaking, man, you want to get out your notebook for sure. And shout out to Big Al rewatching the CM Punk Jackson fight right now. You're a better man than I am. I couldn't make it through that even in my tape. I had to kind of fast forward through some spots there.
I'll just say I've been wrong a million times. I'll be wrong a million times more. But I did, I stood against a lot of my friends, a lot of people that are sharp, and backed the Carlos Candelario side last time. They were like, man, he's a big underdog. And I said, I think Tatsuro Taira could easily win a 30-27 decision. And I said, I think he could also submit him. And he took his back for most of the fight, completely dominated him, and got the 30-26 on two scorecards. So for me, that was proof of concept. I think that he is as good as I thought he was. So until proven wrong, I'm going to keep riding with Taira.
Let's do it. Moving on to another fight where people like the dog, I'd say. This is a women's strawweight bout. Piera Rodriguez, the favorite, taking on Sam Hughes, who is Sam Hughes started off, 0-3 in the organization, and now she's managed to go 2-3, taking out Estela Nunes and Elise Reed. We got Piera Rodriguez is moving towards that. Like, what is she now? She's like a minus 165. It's come back down a little bit. Sam Hughes about plus 140 right now. I gotta say, man, I don't like the Sam Hughes side here. I don't understand the the love for it so much. And this is another fight where I wanted to talk to you about the grappling, because I see a lot of people backing the dog here. Maybe not just because I'm sure there's some that are just thinking, lower level unranked women's MMA. Let me just spam the dog, whatever. I usually like to look at things a little bit deeper than that. But Sam Hughes, they're saying that she's made a lot of improvements in her wrestling. A lot of she's going to dominate the wrestling. I don't know about that. I think Piera Rodriguez is tough enough. I'm not saying she's going to be a future title contender, but Piera Rodriguez seems to have much, much more comfortable striking, hits a lot harder. I think she's just a stronger girl in general. So I'm on the Rodriguez side for some reason, though. It must be rattling in the back of my head something about Sam Hughes, because I can't get to a bet on Rodriguez just yet. But if I were to, I'd bet Rodriguez by decision. I think she can shut down the takedown offense of Sam Hughes and just outstrike her comfortably. Do you see some improvements from Sam Hughes recently, and are you backing the dog here?
Man, I got to just own some L's, because I'm looking back at my Bet MMA profile, and I appreciate that they categorize things by the fighter, so I can look and see all my previous bets for and against. I never got a Sam Hughes bet right. I bet 0.65 units on Sam Hughes against Luana Pinheiro. She lost that fight pretty cleanly. And then I had, what's it called? Elise Reed. 1.5 units to win 1 unit against Sam Hughes, because I thought that she was going to outstrike her. Sure. But did not go the way I thought at all. So, when I'm looking at this matchup, stood out to me as a clear betting pass just off the rip, because I would prefer the favored side. That doesn't really win me money over time. Right. From time to time, I find a nice favorite in women's MMA I like to really back. Sometimes they book, clear mismatches. I think this is a more honest fight. I think Sam Hughes, I get why people like her. She's tough. She's gritty. She's got some decent regional experience as well. She's gone 5 rounds. She's done a lot of things that you'd like from a fighter. She's been in tough fights with tough girls. But I do think that she still has some holes in her game, some vulnerabilities. I think she could still get hurt on the feet. She does not have great striking defense. So I think with all that being said, who do I think the UFC wants to win? That's a question I ask myself a lot. Mm-hmm. I don't know that it's Sam Hughes, and a lot of people are betting her like it's a going out of sale, thing this weekend. So for me, that stands out as a clear pass. But I wish people luck. I like a good underdog, but just for me, I think Piera Rodriguez, physicality plays a big role in women's MMA. I think she might just be able to physically push her into the fence, kind of control minutes, stall them out if she wants to. I will say as well, I haven't had a tremendous amount of success betting on Piera Rodriguez fights. I had a bet on Valeska Machado, not a big bet, but she was a big underdog. I had a bet on the fight to go to decision as well. So, kind of fading the narrative. Everybody thought, she's going to get the finish here. It's going to be a dominant performance. I thought it was a little bit more competitive, but, Piera Rodriguez.
Way competitive, man, because I was on the Rodriguez side for sure, and I was like, why are you blowing this fight right now, But she did that in her last fight, too, and that's something I do. Not that I like it, but Piera Rodriguez is able to work her way back into a fight. She's able to be down a little, like she was down in the second part of that Machado fight. She came back and sealed the deal, albeit kind of close, but in round 3. Same thing with her last fight. She faced a little bit of adversity with Kay Hansen, fixed her mistakes in round 3. Sam Hughes, I guess she did the same thing against Estela Nunes, right? Like Estela Nunes was blooding Sam Hughes' face, and you saw this look on Estela Nunes' face, like in round 2, like she's just punching the lights out of Sam Hughes, just like almost concerned, like, why is this not working? This usually works. And Sam Hughes is coming back and winning. So I can respect that tenacity, but I just think that if you're going to have that kind of lacking defense in your striking that much, I don't like your chances in this fight. So I don't know. I'm glad you're seeing this as a pass, because that's kind of where I landed on this too. Yeah,
man, this for me, there are better ways to invest my time and my money than this kind of fight, because if you bet on the favorite and you lose, you're crying in your coffee. You're like, why did I do this? But sometimes we tempt ourselves into too many women's MMA underdogs when there's just maybe a better fight to bet on on another spot.
Especially for me, like a card like this, I'm not seeing a lot of underdogs that I like. I'm seeing possibilities, but not ones that it's priced well enough for me to bet. So then I start doing that. I'm like, where are the other underdogs coming through? Probably this women's fight, maybe the Sam Hughes fight. Then I tape it. I'm like, this isn't the one,
I feel you, man.
We got Effie saying smoke break fight. I want to see how this plays out. It's kind of like a dramatic tale of Sam Hughes. Can she can she now go 500 in the UFC? Can she go 3-3? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I will say there is some market strength behind her. I'm seeing -160 best price available on Bet Online, and they're probably taking limits to win 20,000. So, they're pretty confident with that line. I think that's close to a fair price for this. About a 60-40 seems all right to me.
Hey, when I cried my coffee as well, my brother. Moving on to this is the one that spoiled our 11-fight card party we had going. Now this is the 12th fight just added on like Sunday. We got the news. Joanderson Brito at featherweight taking on Lucas Alexander. Both guys are shockingly 27 years old. You look at the face of Brito. He's one of those Brazilians that looks like he's 37. Actually, 27-year-old guy, I guess. 13-3-1 record. And Lucas Alexander is going to outsize him at 27. This kid's coming off the regional scene with a 7-2 record. He's 5'10", and I think like a week and a half's notice at best. So we'll see. He's a big dude for the weight class for 145. 7-2 record I mentioned, and he's got 2 losses. Both are 2 submission. And I gotta say, Liam, I don't know if you watched the tape on Alexander too much yet, but that is like the weakness in his game that I noticed is the grappling. He can get controlled on the mat. He was submitted in both of those losses. He is on a 5-fight win streak, and he's got nasty Muay Thai at range. Long limbs, very nice kicks, very dangerous, knees, and then even elbows up close. But man, he got those 2 sub losses, and there's a couple of fights I saw him winning that he had almost gotten sub before he won that fight. So I think if Brito crowds him, he should be able to dictate, wherever this fight goes. He could take him down. The submission, I think, is live. And I think Brito gets this done inside the distance. I don't think I have a prop for that, like a line out yet. But if I could be as lucky as to get like -160 on Brito inside the distance, he is like a -400 favorite right now over Alexander. So that's kind of unplayable, even though I do like Brito. But I'm very I don't see a way that Lucas Alexander wins this fight on short notice. What do you think about this one? Did you get to tape on Lucas yet?
Nope. But what I do have is, like I was mentioning, Joanderson Brito is somebody I bet on in the past. So I do know a decent bit about his game and what he brings to the table. And he's a really explosive guy. He's got a lot of power in both of his hands. He could throw a kick every once in a while that'll turn somebody's head around. So he's got, really dynamic offense. Also, he could just do a pretty traditional wrestling game and get on top of guys and take the back. And he's got very functional grappling. So I would not be surprised at all if he adds a 3rd submission loss to this gentleman's record. But I also could see Brito just bopping him out on the feet. I kind of just wiki cap this. I'm going to look at the tape, obviously, before I get to any plays. There's no real props released yet. So the market hasn't taken full shape, but I will say they opened him in the 2s. He's now in the 3s, approaching the 4s. This might be one of those lines that just goes all one direction.
I was surprised it opened where it did. I didn't get in on it. I probably would have bet Brito if it was under 300. I got in on that. I didn't get a chance to, but I was surprised that it opened like that. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I'm saying that I'm just, how they get crazy with these UFC, guys with the UFC record on short notice. They usually get crazy with the lines. They really take advantage and milk that. But I'm surprised I think it's going to skyrocket by the time fight night comes around. But I'm surprised that we were able to get it, around that -300 price tag.
Yeah, well, they're willing to write the ticket when the limit's $500.
Right,
they don't care. So they'll get
nobody's
on all
rich.
those as long as they can get all the good information from the sharp originators and then take that to market. That's Bet Online's secret juice.
Yeah, exactly. So I think you're right. But you can find all the fights of Lucas Alexander. I think all but maybe one I saw. His last fight was in Anthony Pettis' newest promotion. But you can find him. It's a pretty quick watch. And he's got very nice tools. I like Alexander. But as soon as Brito, the shorter man, gets on the inside, I think it's game over. So I like the under 1.5. I'd like that. Man, if you could get Brito when it opens, if you get that prop at like around anything under -200, I might like, honestly, for inside the distance. So but that's a quick one there. Inflated lines, kind of hard to play, but I'm sure he'll get parlayed up, like you said, into a 500 minus 600 by fight time maybe. But moving on to, this is a really fun fight. This is a close one that we were talking about. This is what Daz Files wanted to hear your opinion on, Liam. This is Nick Maximov taking on Jacob Malkoun at middleweight. I like this fight a lot. This is kind of like the one that's been dividing, combat Twitter, so to speak. This is almost like the Jotko Brendan Allen fight from a couple weeks back. Everybody's kind of on one side, pretty convicted. And I'll let you kick this one off. What do you like about these guys? What do you dislike? And especially the grappling and wrestling aspect. I know you're an expert in. What do you see?
Yeah, for me, this is a tricky one, right? Because these are two guys that I have historically been looking to fade a little bit. I did get that nice play on Andre Petroski plus 350 last time out. That was a good bet. Just a unit there, but took the shot. Just didn't really believe the hype against him. Martinez BJJ at the time was undefeated in the UFC. Just a lot of things that I was not understanding about the pricing there. Maximov's advantage in his fights is that he's good at grappling. He's persistent at wrestling. That wasn't really going to help him against Petroski, which people learned, pretty quickly. I actually bet, I regret so much to this day. I think it was only $5 on Andre Petroski by sub in round one. It was plus 2,500. And really regrettable.
What a quick night in the office that was.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, man, it's the bets we don't make. It's the bets that we size incorrectly where you're like, I just turned down a free bag. Like I could have, if I had bet half a unit, we're going on vacation. But
I can't remember having a play on that one. I don't know if I did. Because I remember I probably didn't, because I remember laughing about it because I was at a friend's birthday party or something. So I just had the fights on my phone and I was telling my buddy, I'm like, oh, the early prelims are about to start. And as I was turning on the stream, thinking I was on time, it was already over and they were waking up Maximov. I'm like, oh my God, what?
Oh, that's brutal, man. And he's
funny.
going to be, eager to get back in the driver's seat here, right? If you're a grappler, you go out there, you get submitted in the first round. That's embarrassing. You don't want that to happen.
And the first professional loss, right?
Yep. So he's going to be looking to get back. And I thought he should have probably lost.
Am I losing you again a little bit here, Liam? See if your Wi-Fi shakes out. We're getting a hot take from Liam too. Oh, there you are.
Oh, goodness.
You're right in the middle of your hot take. You're like, I think he lost, and then you cut out.
Well, I did think that, he probably lost to Puna Soriano.
Sure.
The night that I first watched it, you could accuse me of watching with green-colored glasses. I had a bet on Puna that night. But I also just thought, even on rewatch, I was like, man, Puna did most of the damage in that fight. He did most of the really effective things in that fight, but he couldn't get his back off the cage, and then he tore his knee.
He was taken down like a million times, right? Popping back up, but...
Yeah, it wasn't even I felt like most of it wasn't really takedowns. It was literally just control against the fence with he'd push him to his hands, he'd pop back. It wasn't really oh, he's got him down and he's looking to put the hook in and he's beating him up he was mostly just holding on to him really tight. And I thought he did the same thing against Brundage. Brundage kind of busted his face up a little bit. And I think that fight was on short notice for Brundage off the top of my head. And he didn't look great in the later rounds. He was slowing down.
That was on short notice because that was UFC 266 last September. And that was a fight that was the last one added. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was out there basically just chain wrestling, takedown, just going for takedowns on a guy who was on short notice. That's exhausting. If you guys have never wrestled before and you are in a fight on short notice, the last thing you want to do is just wrestle hard for 15 minutes. It's exhausting. And so I don't think that he had much of a chance there. You know who likes to wrestle for 15 minutes? Jacob Malkoun, man. He's a weirdo like that. I think that this is kind of a binary fight, though. It's about whose wrestling is better and who gets on top. I think Maximov probably fares a lot better if he's put on his back in this fight. I think he's more competent in the guard. I think he's a little bit more, well-developed in that area of his jiu-jitsu. But I think Maximov is a pretty heavy top player. If he gets on top, he might be able to get some takedowns and just ride this, kind of like Maximov has done to so many guys and make it a greasy fight. But I do think Maximov is just a higher level grappler. I think if somebody's more likely to get snatched with a submission in this fight, I do think it's Malkoun. I think that Malkoun gets away with some things in some of his fights because he's fighting a little bit lower level guys. I do think Maximov projects a little bit higher in terms of his grappling upside. but it's not a fight I have a lot of confidence in. It's a fight that I do think should be lined pretty closely because I think if you bet one of these guys and they get taken down in the first exchange, you're going to be like, oh my God, I effed up. Like, this is a mistake. So that for me is the kind of downside with betting a fight like this. You might even get plausible upside, right? I'm betting Malkoun, he's a dog. But then if he gets taken down in the first exchange and just mollywopped on the ground, you're like, oh, I had zero value. So this is a wait and see kind of fight for me. It's prospect versus prospect. I use that term kind of loosely, but just two young guys that really have a lot to prove to show that they're at this level. You know, both guys have shown they can get blown out in the UFC and lose in the first minute and a half. You know, it's like we've seen that from both these guys. Malkoun's not above it. He got blasted out of there by Phil Hawes, who hasn't blasted out of – I mean, it took him, 7.5 minutes of beating Duran Win like a drum to put him down. So
that took him 18 seconds against Malkoun.
Yeah, and it's because he was pooping his pants because they were forced to strike. I think that the way that this fight could turn into a shit show is like, what if both these guys just end up striking? Neither one of them can get the takedown. Then what does that fight look like? I think it would favor Maximov because Maximov shows some regional knockouts. He can throw high kicks. He can mix together some punches with his takedown attempts. I think he might be able to put him into the fence and throw some body shots and just maybe get off with a little bit more volume. But honestly, it's a crapshoot. So, you're asking me to lay chalk on that side. I do think he wins. I think that Maximov has more upside probably in both the positions. But I do think, that last fight showed me he's not above making mistakes. He's gotten his face busted up by the Cody Brundages of the division. I don't have a tremendous amount of confidence in him yet. I think he's still getting his feet wet in the UFC. So not laying chalk with him, but I think Maximov wins.
That was very helpful and a good breakdown. It didn't help me with my bet that I have on Maximov. You're still giving me a little bit of question marks there, but at least you're not on the Malkoun side. I am very confident in Maximov, oddly enough, and I waited for that price to come back down to minus 135. I think it's coming down even closer. So I laid down that 1.35 units to win one. That's as far as I want to get with it. I just think he's like you said, I think he's the upside in the wrestling, and I think he's going to dictate where this fight takes place. Not to mention the size advantage he has, being just a bigger, physically imposing guy here. I think he is. I don't know if he's the better striker technically, but I think he's the more eager to do it, kind of as you had sort of agreed with that. So I don't know. I just think it's going to be a little bit, night and day as far as the wrestling positions go. You saw Malkoun struggle in the Brendan Allen fight with, the activity, the damage, right? And, we have the same gripes about Maximov, but he's a little bit more, he's been struggling because he's been fighting all wrestlers, right? Puna, was in college wrestling. Brundage, the same thing, college wrestler. Petrosky was like a lifetime wrestler. As far as Malkoun, he looks pretty good, but he's not fighting any wrestlers. He's kind of fighting all the same kind of guys, right? Very fast, explosive guys. Phil Hawes is like an early fast starter. Razak Hassan, same thing, So these are guys who, AJ Dobson is the name I'm thinking too. Powerlifter, trains at Westside Barbell in Columbus, like
Ohio stand up, baby.
There we go. Yeah. So another kind of like fast starter kid who I think I'm excited to see AJ Dobson in his next fight, by the way, too. I was rooting for him in that fight against Malkoun, but he couldn't get the job done. So he's looking very good wrestling against guys that are like non-wrestlers and kind of are explosive guys. So I think when he faces a grinder the size of Maximov, I don't think it's going to fare well for him, but I'm interested to see how it plays out. You're probably on the right side of this, Liam, just sitting back and, it's like a show me spot, as you mentioned. So I don't know. But what do you think about the sloppy seconds comment here, split decision? Do you think it's that close? I have a feeling one guy's going to dominate kind of unanimously here, 2-1 rounds, or I think it's going to be more clear cut than that. What do you think?
See, I think that the next comment as well, tells a bit of the story. We could see Malkoun gas out here. I don't know how much stock I want to put into that. It's tricky. He's probably going to get exactly the fight he wants here, where they both end up wrestling and grappling a lot. So I think that's, to his favor potentially. But I think it's being forced to be on the feet that makes him uncomfortable. I also think Brendan Allen, I got to give the devil his due, right? I've been vocally just not a huge fan. And there's no personal gripe with the guy, just of his game. I think there's a lot of looseness. He's a very aloof guy. Like, I think it's a disaster waiting to happen at some point again in the future. But those big, tall, long guys, sometimes they have that leverage. I think Maximov's going to be a little bit bigger here, but Brendan Allen's like a big guy for the middleweight division in terms of his length. He's just a long guy. He's got a big, awkward frame. And he was able to move around Jocko, who normally does that to other guys by being a lanky, weird, tall guy. It's like that kind of plays to your advantage if you know how to use it. And I do think Maximov wins, but like I say, it just doesn't have all those same physical dimensions. I think whoever gets on top is going to win the fight, and maybe it won't be that close. Sloppy seconds. So that's the problem for me. It could turn into a unanimous decision when we find out who the better wrestler is. I just have a little bit of open questions about that. I don't just believe in the size theory of wrestling. I think Maximov is probably the better wrestler, but I want to see that put to the test. He really struggled to put Puna on the ground. There's been a lot of guys offering him resistance there. So I just want to see a little bit more, but I think he gets it done.
And shout out to our guy WizBets, saying shout out to two of the best in the game. I'll put Liam in that category. I'm just hanging out. I'm just trying to belong in this game. All right. But moving on to the next fight we have. This is a fun one. Another huge money line. We got Victor Henry right now taking on legend of the game, Rafael Assuncao, who I was supposed to see that guy fight for the belt against Renan Barão back in the day. And ended up, I think there was an Assuncao injury. So we had got that legendary TJ Dillashaw getting moved to the main event spot on short notice and getting the belt. So, Rafael Assuncao is one of the guys who's probably been around the longest, fought everybody that ever did it at the weight class and never got his shot. And now he's riding a 4-fight loss streak. It looks like there's a sharp decline. You see a guy who Assuncao used to be durable, used to find a way to slow down fights and pick his spots. And now, a lot of finishes in his last few fights. 3 out of 4 have been finishes. So Victor Henry's a guy who just burst in the scene, but he's been fighting UFC talent for a long time, just not in the UFC. He comes in there. Liam said he was on that sharp side and saw that there was a lot of value in Victor Henry against Raoni Barcelos, who was still looking very good. That win aged extremely well. I think this fight between Victor Henry and Assuncao plays out a little bit differently than that one because, Rafael Assuncao is not a guy who's going to stand and bang with him in the pocket the way that Raoni Barcelos wanted to. But I do think Victor Henry is the rightful favorite here. And I'm thinking even a late finish is maybe live for Victor Henry, who's not like a one-hitter quitter, but he's got a laser beam of a right cross. And when he lands that over and over again and picks his spots, I don't know if Assuncao still got that durability at 40 years old to withstand some of that, especially as this goes on. So I don't expect there to be, 300 significant strikes in the favor of Victor Henry like he did in his last fight. But I do think Henry wins this fight with just really mixing up his weapons well. Leg kicks to close range elbows to, just really nice boxing at range, getting in, getting out. And his clinch work looks pretty good as well for Victor Henry. So, Liam, how do you think Assuncao would have to perform here to win this fight? Do you agree with this money line the way it is? I think it's currently sitting at, we're looking at minus 365 for Victor Henry, plus 300 Assuncao. Do you agree with that line, or do you think there is some chance that Assuncao can turn back the hands of time here and pull off the upset?
Yeah, I'm not rushing to the window necessarily to lay the minus 360. I don't think that that's a horrible price. I do think it could be higher. Just because of recent performances, because of what we've seen in terms of some long-term trends. You mentioned his durability has really taken a hit recently, but I went back and I did watch the earlier knockouts that he suffered in his career as well. The guy just has been in range to be hit for a lot of his career. Sometimes it's bit him in the ass. Sometimes it hasn't. He does a good job floating around the octagon, but just his style is basically predicated on eventually saying, like, I'm going to sit down here and throw a couple big shots. Otherwise he would lose every fight. He's not out-voluming people. He's mostly conceding the front foot. Occasionally he'll take a little bit of a lead, and come forward, throw a blitzing combination, get you on the back foot. But a lot of the time he's looking for some leg kicks. He's looking for, small prodding opportunities. Maybe he'll touch you with a jab. And then he's looking to go big overhand, like switch stance overhand right. And as you get older, you don't lose the power, but you lose the timing. And I think that he's just been getting caught on his timing a lot more readily, where guys are countering him now with a lot more efficiency. There's a theory in MMA that I think is correct, where you should go first and third. You should throw first, then you're drawing out the reaction. Then it's not, I have to predict what he's going to do, avoid it, and then throw back. Instead, I can create the collision, dictate what's going to happen, make a predictable response to what he's going to do, and then counter again. So I get the first and the third go at it. And I think
that's why the guys that are really good at feinting are so, lethal in this game, right?
Yes, and that's exactly what we saw from Victor against Howney. He went out there and he out-feinted him and he out-threw him. So it really wasn't a difference in skill. It wasn't a difference in class. It was one guy was willing to do more. He had the cardio to do more. And he kept throwing and he kept feinting and he kept giving Howney Barcelos, who wanted to sit down and throw a big, heavy counter, nothing to read cleanly. So he would have to just commit to throwing and get hurt himself, throwing into massive counter opportunities for Henry. And we saw that with elbows. We saw that with knees. We saw that with punches. We saw that with uppercuts. We saw that with hooks. We saw it with straights. The guy lit him up with every tool in the box. He threw the teep to the body probably 50 times. So he can do a lot. He does not get tired doing it. And he did it at an extremely high pace with somebody who's very good. He defended almost every takedown attempt, popped his way back up to his feet when he did get taken down, didn't concede any bad grappling positions to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. So now he's got another Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt here who has been submitted multiple times, who has been knocked out multiple times, who is going to be on the ropes here. His career's on the line. If he loses his fight, he's not getting another fight with the UFC. I can almost guarantee that. So it's really a do or die situation. And he's probably going to go out there and try and swing for a big finish. And that didn't work against Ricky Simon. And it didn't work against Marlon Moraes. So it's like, there's just these fights where if that was going to work, it should have worked already. And it's not working. This is considered a step down in competition to most people because they were betting Howney Barcelos in that last fight, with all respect. But it's just like he was the known guy, and Victor Henry's just this random guy. Yeah. And I think that people will think the same thing again, where they're like, Assuncao is getting the step down in competition against this Victor Henry guy. I think Victor Henry could beat a lot of guys. I think he could beat guys in the top 15. So I think Victor Henry is going to bring it here. I think his pace is going to be way too much. I think that we could see a cardio-based stoppage. I think that we could see a knockout that, people aren't really expecting. Victor Henry doesn't have a tremendous amount of power, but he does throw a lot. And sometimes that's all it takes. Ricky Simon, he's landed a couple of big knockout strikes recently. He wasn't known for his big knockout punching before those, recent fights where he was landing those big shots. So I think that all that's to say, this is a tough fight for Rafael Assuncao. It would take a near perfect performance. He has to land a big counter and put down Victor Henry. He's never been knocked out in professional MMA.
Exactly. That's another part where it's like if you can turn back the hands of time or get something crazy, it's like you're still facing a guy in Henry who's had 27 professional fights against tough guys, UFC caliber guys, and he's never been put away. So
Assuncao needs to bring his wrestling shoes.
Yeah,
that's how I feel.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough because I feel like Assuncao's in that mindset, of course, like a lot of gritty guys. Like you mentioned, he's always fought that way and tried to, jab his way in range, get that big overhand, that big fight-ending shot, and it just never quite comes. And he's always going to feel like he's got 5 more minutes to do it each round. And I don't know. I think he eventually gets pieced up enough. Just accumulation of strikes. I think he can get finished in this fight by Victor Henry. So, yeah, and Henry's been playing that game, using all of his weapons, just like he did against Barcelos for a long time. Don't get me wrong. I'm very familiar with Victor Henry and his work in Risen and all that, but I was just very romanticizing, I think, Howney Barcelos. I thought he was kind of the guy that Victor Henry is now, like a 35-year-old bantamweight that can kind of make some waves in the division. And, as we saw, he just
he's aged. So. Yeah, exactly. It's aged great.
Yeah,
the guy's still out there kicking people's ass.
Yeah, so I did a fun parlay with Victor Henry and a couple unders on this card as well. That was just how I played it to get like an even money play. But it's just kind of a fun one. I think Victor Henry should have a pretty good time in the cage on Saturdays. So yeah, that's any action after did the same. Dabbled in the Devil's Magic and parlayed at -375 fighter. Yeah, Rafael's Fade City. We got our boy Mike, Couch Warrior Podcast. There we are. Yeah, I think our boy Gordo and Couch Warrior just did his show last night with Couch Warrior and Matt Semmelsberger. So I got to go back and rewatch that. I wanted to have a fresh mindset of Gordo's picks before I did his show. So I'm going to watch that for sure, Mike. And Henry decision or inside the distance. What do you think here? I'm thinking it could be either one. I think there might be a prop out there where it's like round 3 or decision. I wouldn't hate that if that was some plus money. What do you think about that one, Liam? Do you think he gets it done, or did he just points his way to a decision here?
I think people might be tempted to the decision because he didn't finish Howney last fight. But I think if you rewatch that fight,
it was close.
There were several opportunities for a finish. And
round
honestly,
one, he was close.
Howney just fought like a complete gangster. Like with his back against the wall, there was a couple times he just threw a random big counter that like sent Henry because he was like, well, I thought this guy was dead. Like, and that for me was like all I needed to see. I think that this is the kind of fight where, you know, this is probably the last time we see Victor Henry on the prelims for a while. I think he's too fun. I think he's going to, be in some fun fights. I think they're going to want to use him because he goes out there and makes it a brawl and puts it on the line. And I think if he does that again here, he can win the fight in any position. So I like Victor Henry. I think he gets it done inside the distance personally.
Awesome. There we are. Yeah, and that I like that round 3 TKO is plus 1,200. Not a bad look for a little accumulation of damage there, but it could be earlier than that. But we got one more fight on the prelims. We got 19 live viewers rocking with us. Hit that like, hit that subscribe. Subscribe to my boy Liam Picks Fights, and all of his information, including his Patreon, is in the description as well. But yeah, so moving on to the last prelim fight, we've got Mana Martinez taking on Brandon Davis. Brandon Davis in his second fight of his second stint in the UFC right now. The first fight of that was unsuccessful against Danab Bakary. He got knocked out in round 1. Mana Martinez, a very powerful striker. I think 8 out of his 9 victories so far are knockouts. So, it seems like a tailor-made matchup for Mana Martinez, but there are some holes in Martinez's game that were exposed by Ronnie Lawrence. You know, I thought he showed a decent get-up ability, but Ronnie Lawrence is just so relentless. He was able to get him down for periods of time. But that was a fun fight, right? Mana Martinez knocked down like 3 times before round 3 started. Then in round 3 comes back, gets 2 knockdowns of his own. Such a fun fight, but ultimately, Ronnie Lawrence came out on that one. But yeah, what do you think about Brandon Davis, Liam? I'm just not, especially that last fight against Danab Bakary. He just looked so slow. He looked slow to react to strikes. He looked like his reflexes were kind of shot against things that I thought were kind of telegraphed from Danab Bakary, honestly, in round 1. I don't know. Is it the weight cut? Is it the time? And he's going to have time off in this fight. He just had a surgery on his knee, I think, twice before this fight. So I don't know. I'm on the Mana Martinez side. I do have a money line bet on Mana Martinez. I got him at minus 150 mark. Just playing that 1.5 to win 1. What do you think here?
Yeah, this is a fight that is it's interesting, right? Because I've been burnt with Mana before, right? I did bet him by knockout against Guido Canetti.
Okay.
I think I had the fight to end by knockout. The under.
That was an annoying fight, wasn't it? That was an annoying fight.
Oh, you betcha. And then, of course, I had Ronnie Lawrence inside the distance that night, and not really all that close. You know, I thought the guy who was closer to finishing was Mana that night. I rocked him all over the place a couple times, and I was like, well, I'm never betting on Ronnie Lawrence again. I'm kidding, of course. If the right matchup comes along, of course I will. But I did fade him successfully in his last fight.
Hey, same here, dude.
My man. Kakramanov, that guy plays for keeps. But what I think is an important takeaway here, the Mana pricing has changed significantly, right? He went from being priced like plus 125 to win by knockout against Guido Canetti. It's now like plus 250 against Brandon Davis, who's been knocked out a number of times. So that's something that's interesting to me. But Danab Bakary does hit hard. He was coming off of a knee injury in that fight. He got the surgery after the fact. So you'd have to hope he's in better physical condition after being surgically repaired. But I do think that there's just enough question marks on the Brandon Davis side here that he's probably got to be a dog. I think skill for skill, Brandon Davis might be a better fighter. But like you mentioned, it's a reaction time. It's the things that, the intangibles. How do you cap somebody coming back off a knee injury? I can tell you most of the time it doesn't turn out that great. But I do think that, Brandon Davis at his best could out-grapple Mana Martinez. He could just take his back, get on top of him, have some success there. If he doesn't get takedowns, if he doesn't get on top of him, I think it becomes a much more clear fight for Mana. I think the thing that impressed me about Mana regionally is his left hook. He just throws a very tight left hook that compromises a lot of people. And I do think that when your balance is off from something like a knee injury, could lead to more knockouts. Cain Velasquez, he got knocked out by Francis Ngannou. He basically just got hit and his knee blew out and he fell over. And then that's the end of the fight. But that it really wasn't like he was asleep. Like, oh my! And he did get hit with a big punch. I'm not trying to discount it, but I'm just saying, like, those kind of things make you a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more fragile potentially in this high stakes combat scenario, especially when it's so recent. Not a lot of, distance between him and that surgery. Maybe we see, these improvements over time. Maybe we see him get back to his old form now that he's gotten the surgery. But do I want to buy in with if it's plus 350, it's like, there's a lot of questions. It's a much closer line than that. So it's like, for me, not really tempted to take Brandon Davis here, though I think he could win.
Yeah, and Davis, I mean, his only wins in the UFC are what, over Steven Peterson and Randy Costa, and the Randy Costa one's certainly not aged well. I think he was knocked down by Kyung Ho Kang in that fight. So a lot of the times he's getting out, either out damaged or just out wrestled in his fights, So I don't know. And coming back in his second stint, and that's not looking too good now, having the surgeries. I know we got Big Al saying he's coming off a major knee injury. Who knows how it affected his training? I believe that knee surgery was like in January, February, something like that. So, we got sex bots in here. I think it's because Liam's here. He's the sex appeal.
They follow me, I guess. I hope you guys are having a great night, everybody.
Yeah, so I don't know. So yeah, we're on the Mana side with that. I'm not in love with Mana either. I don't think he's super high level, but I think his skill set kind of fits into the just the weaknesses of Davis right now. Who just I can't get that out of my mind how slow he looked against Dana Bakary. That was terrible. Was it not?
Yeah, and Dana hasn't looked so great since. I saw him get knocked out in his most recent bout in person in UFC Columbus. So right. Man, that's something I always like to take into account, how well do your wins age and things like that. And I do think, for Brandon Davis, he hasn't really proven he could get a win at the UFC level for some time. So that's the open question here. Can he beat somebody who's on the fringes of the UFC level like Manny Martinez? I think in order to save his UFC career, he's got to win this fight. It's like a must-win situation. That's the kind of thing that makes me not want to bet Manny Martinez on the money line against him. Really hard to bet against somebody who's got their back against the wall like that. Manny Martinez probably has a little bit longer leash. He's a younger guy. He's got a little bit more room to grow and make some improvements. So I think that overall Mana projects a little bit higher. It's just a little fresher, a little bit more dangerous, but just don't have enough confidence to back him on the money line here. If anything, it'd be a little prop shot on the Mana side for me, or I'd pass on the fight entirely.
Yeah, on that knockout at plus 250, plus 255, I like that one quite a bit as well. But moving on from the prelims, finally we're on the main card of this fight night, and 23 of you guys rocking with us. So glad to have LiamPicksFights here, coming straight out of kicking people's ass in jiu-jitsu, showered off, and he's ready to talk fights. So this guy is just high energy and nonstop fun. So thanks for being here, Liam. And we got a 205-pound bout up next with Alonzo Menifield and Misha Cirkunov. Let the violence begin. I do have the under 1.5 in this fight at minus 110. I like that quite a bit. I did parlay up the fight doesn't go to decision at minus 275 with that Victor Henry money line and one other violent spot on this card. But I got to say, man, both guys are dangerous in their own way in this fight. And if this doesn't go under 1.5, this could get very greasy, in my opinion, right? I mean, you got Alonzo Menifield minus 220. You got Misha Cirkunov about plus 180. I mean, both guys have just nonstop finishes under 1.5, right? 11 of 15 for Menifield are under 1.5. You got 18 of 23 for Cirkunov under 1.5. If Cirkunov can get this fight to the ground, man, I think he's a problem. And you can speak to the BJJ that you've seen from him, but he does have that chin issue as well, where he can just get sparked by a guy like Ryan Spann or something like that. So, man, I don't know. They're both about the same age, though. Menifield's 34. Cirkunov is surprisingly only 35. I always think he's much older. I got to say, this is more 50-50 than not for me. And I'm leaning just based on that on the Cirkunov side. I think he could get this done. If it goes late, I think he could get it done early by like some sort of weird submission. Maybe Menifield follows him to the ground. Maybe Cirkunov just avoids the early power altogether, drags this over 7.5 minutes and starts, clinching him on the cage and getting a takedown. So confusing fight. How do you think this plays out? Are you on the Menifield side, like knocking him out early, or how do you see this going? Any bets on this fight first off either? You got anything on this one with the time props?
Oh, God, no. I haven't bet $1 on this fight. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. I've not invested a cent in this fight. But basically the way I see it is like Misha Cirkunov and Alonzo Menifield are two guys I've been trying to bet against all the time. Like I bet Ovince St. Preux. I bet him inside the distance. I bet Ed Herman. took the L there with my boy Ed Herman, plus 205. Don't kick a man while he's down, a half a unit shot on my boy Ed Herman. But I think that, the only time I've ever made a positive bet in the direction of our guy is the under 1.5 against Fabio Chiron, because I thought that was a pretty clean look pre-fight. I don't love betting totals in MMA. I do bet them from time to time, but that was one that stood out to me like a sore thumb. I got the under there for -120, under 1.5 rounds, -120.
I think Chiron had just had that like 5-round fight for the LFA belt, didn't he, at the time as well? He came in on short notice and did not go too well. It was very quick.
Yeah, it was an insta sub there on the ground. And I'm not sure that we're going to see that here. Misha is a much more talented grappler than a lot of guys that he's fought. I think Misha's losses overall are just a grade higher than somebody like Menifield. Pretty washy. OSP beat him, in fairness. But that was a southpaw matchup. Do you think we've seen marginal improvements from him over time? He's a little bit more aggressive, trying to get on top of guys. I don't think that Misha Cirkunov is somebody I can rely on to fight for my money on it. Like, truthfully, just sometimes checks out. I think he's got a, good looking wife and, probably has some money from doing something else. I don't know. There's just something about Misha. I bet him against Ryan Spann, and I literally said, I was like, I will never bet this guy ever again. I don't care who he fights. And so a lot of people got trapped when the man moved to middleweight. I was like, never again, period.
Right.
Dropped a unit on that one. The only bet that hit there was the under 1.5 rounds for 1 unit at -125. And right now, I don't have it in front of me. Let me pull it up. The under for this fight is sitting right around that same mark, -122.
Yeah, it's still there. I got it at -110. I bet that because I think it's the math.
That's cashed in a couple of these guys' recent fights right around the same line. That's something that does give me, a little bit of marginal interest. I said I haven't bet $1 on this fight, like not touching it with a 10. I'll be honest, the correlated under 1.5 with both these guys that I don't trust at all. I don't hate that. I don't hate that at the -120. I'm not laying significant chalk. I'm not chasing that prop, but that's something I would at least look at. The under for this fight.
What do you think?
You got two guys completely unreliable.
If this goes over 1.5, this makes its way after round 1. They sit down on their stools. They waddle back out for round 2. 2 minutes passes. Everybody rips up their under 1.5 tickets. Then who wins this fight? And how does it go?
I don't think either one of these guys has great cardio. I don't think that's a selling point for either one of these guys. But I think that, it's really a question of if Cirkunov's getting takedowns, he's probably okay. I just don't think the guy likes striking, man. He's not bad at it, but it's just like he's so visibly uncomfortable and like looks like he's like stiff in the shoulders and like there's a few things I really don't like about his striking, and that's the reason I haven't bet on him in a long time. I would prefer probably the underdog shot here to betting on Alonzo Menifield as a juiced out favorite. But I do think that there's just some equity in Alonzo being more physical, pushing him into the cage and just doing kind of what he did against William Knight, where it cost him. But just like, I don't know that Cirkunov's even going to offer that one burst of like chasing him across the ring. Nothing landed. That's one of the worst judging decisions I've ever seen. I mean, it wasn't, you can't really like cry in your coffee if you were a Menifield backer. He did nothing in the 3rd round, but he at least attempted like some semblance of MMA offense. He like controlled him against the fence and like tried to go for takedowns. The other guy legitimately threw punches that did not land at all, and they gave him the round. I was like, man, as a grappler, you really got to make something happen, or you get no credit.
Yeah, it was a greasy one. I was trying to see what this Cirkunov in round 1 is +700. Where's Cirkunov? Cirkunov wins in round 1 KO, TKO, or DQ +2,000. I'm just looking at Big Al's prop here. Cirkunov has legit power. Took a shot at Cirkunov by round 1 KO. Look, honestly, not the worst. I would lean towards Cirkunov round 1 sub, honestly, if I had to do, and that's like +1,100 or something like that. But Jesus, yeah, if that hits, you're a genius, Big Al. That's amazing. I mean, either guy, I like the under 1.5 here, and I think it's that price. I mean, your eyes popped out of your head, Liam, when you saw that, because I think it just mathematically just works out. But I think that's either going to cash really easily in a minute, or it's going to fail
or you're
miserably.
Going to be sick, yeah.
They're going to be hugging each other on the perimeter of the cage the whole time, and I don't know.
Welcome to light heavyweight.
I'm glad we're both on it should be more 50-50. The line should be closer because I see a lot of people slam dunking Menifield, and it could easily hit for sure. He could just bop Cirkunov over the head in 30 seconds. It's over. But
if you faded Cirkunov, you've done very well. You've done just fine.
We got a couple specific questions. One from Effie. You think you could take down Martinez? His back
I don't know, man. I'd have to know his walking around weight outside the cage, and then I'd be able to tell you a little bit better.
Related question from nowhere.
160. And I feel like if he's like 155, I'd have a better chance than if he's 145. Because if he's 145, he might be too fast, man. These guys, I'm telling you, I've met MMA guys. Their footwork's so good. It's actually really hard to take them down just based on the footwork. It's hard to catch them. It's hard to get a hold of them. They're squirmy.
Unless related to Papa Chuck's next question, unless he's sitting in a bar, we find Martinez in a bar sipping on a Corona, dude. If we're
fighting Martinez in a bar, I'm getting slept with a left hook. I hate to tell you, my friend.
Nah. I'm gonna be looking mean, and then he's gonna be looking at me, and then you're gonna get him with the rear naked choke, slap it right on, sneak attack.
All right, maybe if we got that 2-on-1, then we'd get it.
Yeah, we got Randy Fowler like in Menifield here. There's a lot of people on Menifield, and look, I definitely see that hitting probably more often than not. But the way the money line is set up, I think I just can't trust either guy. So I'm taking that under 1.5. I like that.
I think Menifield minus 185 makes a lot of sense to me. That's what I would probably put it at. Just again, this is more of like a top of my head one. When I look at the board, sometimes I just establish, I'm like, is this a fight I really want to bet on? Or is this a fight that I'm going to look into for a long time and then go, I'm not betting on either one of these guys. Yeah. So I kind of just look at some fights as probably a pass. This was probably a pass for me, but I think it could be a little closer. If it got out to plus 250, plus 300, now I'm like, all right, you just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. Dude, that's what it would have been like.
Well, I think the next fight is very related to that, just down 20 pounds to 185. We got Duško Todorovic taking on Jordan Wright, the Beverly Hills Ninja. We got Duško right around that minus 200, minus 215 mark, I want to say. Where are we at here? Yeah, minus 205, minus 220. I'm seeing it all over the board here, inching towards minus 220. Jordan Wright could be had for about that plus 175 underdog price. And man, both guys somehow are, even though Jordan Wright's a meme, both guys have the same record in the UFC. They're both 2 wins, 3 losses, so both guys lacking in durability. So Jordan Wright, of course, is lacking in that cardio. He's never been to a decision, never been to round 3, never been past 7.5 minutes. So if you're passing on Misha Cirkunov and Menifield, what do you think about the time props in this fight, Liam? And who do you think wins? Does Jordan Wright have a chance to pull off the upset here? Maybe even win by decision. Do you think he's going to outpoint Duško to a decision here?
I have never been sold on the Jordan Wright experiment, right? He's taken a couple bad losses, just quick knockouts, ugly looking knockouts, knockouts that kind of looked like he folded up and didn't want anymore. And also ones where he just got shut down. So, those are some concerning looks. He's a young guy. He came in with some, relative inexperience against good guys. So definitely a learning curve for somebody like that in the UFC. He's shown that he has potent offense. I think even against Bruno Silva, he landed a couple good shots, just can't really sustain damage as well. Doesn't have great defense, doesn't have great head movement, doesn't have great posture, doesn't have great hand positioning. So you're going to get knocked out a lot if you do that in a weight class like 185. I just don't know that I'm sold on Duško. And I think it's interesting here that he went from being a dog back to being a big favorite here. I do think that that's probably strength. I do think that's probably strength in the market. I think that he's probably the likely winner here. He's probably just got more outs overall. Jordan Wright is going to need to get that early finish. Can I put it past him? No. We've seen Duško be finished early. We've seen him underperform. We've seen him fail to cover many betting lines. But I do think that, having that big correction coming off a knockout loss is something where either, I have to try and think like a bookmaker as well as thinking like an analyst, because these guys, I never met a bookmaker with a part-time job, right? And this is a fight on the main card. It's going to get some public attention. And maybe people know the name Duško. He's been on a bunch of cards. He's fought some guys that were fun. He's been on the right end and the wrong end of some finishes as well. So I think Jordan Wright's kind of the same way. People know him as like, oh, that guy's kind of fun. He brings the action. I think people might get tempted into the under, But if you've watched Dusko in some of his wins, they're a lot more calculated. They're a lot more. I think even against Daquan Townsend, it went over where he's like grabbing like wrist wraps behind the back and like landing this like weird pitter patter ground and pound.
It went over by 45 seconds, over 1.5.
There you go. And that, I mean, Daquan Townsend, with all due respect, is one of the, the lower level fighters that's been in the UFC recently. I don't think he got a win at the UFC level in 4 attempts. So, he fought some decent guys, but he's not fighting world champions. Had a really tough time finding the win there. So this is for me a fight where I bit into Dusko last time. I was like an underdog price, like Chitty. Thought he was a little suspect. By the way, did cash Gregory Rodriguez against Chitty, so I got my revenge. But I will say I bet Chitty as an underdog before that, so I'm not a Chitty hater. I just was like, man, the overcorrection on Chitty from the big knockouts is coming, and then he knocked him out instantly. I'm like, okay, great. So I did buy back in, right? I didn't abandon the strategy, and I think that in this case, the strategy for me says that fading Jordan Wright is always a good idea, but I don't have the right guy. I don't have the guy I want to back. I don't have the guy I feel comfortable. Bruno Silva, I was very confident that Bruno Silva was going to absolutely dust that guy, no matter what happened. I was like, Bruno's got a good chin. He's not going to go down easily. Gerald Mearshart is a dog built differently. I did not bet Bruno there because that was the trap of the century. But I'm saying this kind of guy, Jordan Wright, I can't trust him with my money. I just can't trust him with my money. I think that he could get knocked out. I think he could get submitted, but I just don't have enough faith on the other guy. He's been getting knocked out. Talk about bad hand positioning, bad posture. The guy keeps his chin right up in the air, his hands at his sides. He throws
pulls it back straight up in the air in a straight line as well. Yeah, it's disgusting at times.
In the clinch, he can be very dangerous. He can be very potent. He can throw a lot of volume.
And he's got a big old egghead like mine, which is easy to hit. You pull it back in a straight line. It shines a little bit, shows you exactly where to punch. It's like, what are you doing?
He's got good ground and pound, though. And that's the thing where it's like, for me, a guy who can't take shots very well, I'm not confident in his ability to defend a takedown. Like, I think that this could be one takedown and then he's getting a bunch of bombs rained down on him and he can't take the shots. Like, that's for me the upside on Dusko. That's why he's favored here. Probably just has more outs in the fight. But, is it a fight you really want to say, almost 70% of the time, 70% of the time to break even, Dusko's winning this fight? It's a little tough.
Well, the strategy I took, and I did put a bet on this fight. I put a bet on the Dusko inside the distance was minus 150. So that was able to chop it down. I think that basically becomes his money line in this fight. I don't see Jordan Wright. No evidence he can even make it past 6 minutes, much less to the scorecards here. So I was able to, kind of justify to myself that way because I think it does end up like the Daquan Townsend. I think it ends up like the Maki Patolo where it's, like you said, it's ground and pound finish. You could even see Jordan Wright tap and do the strikes. I don't even know, So I took the inside the distance at minus 150 from Todorovic, and it's straight up gambling. I mean, it's just like, it's not like you said. If I was really making a smart play, you just stay off of this fight because I don't have the guy that I want to really back in Todorovic. But I think at this point, surviving against Gregory Rodriguez, who I have bet on every single fight since his Contender Series fight, which is a loss. I bet him in the LFA when he won. I bet him coming back to the UFC. Even that loss against what's his face, Petrosian. I've been backing him ever since. So I might just continue that trend as far as it can with RoboCop. But it's almost a feather in your cap at this point that Todorovic went 15 minutes with him. So I think it's more high level losses. Jordan Wright, one of his 2 wins in the UFC was a cut stoppage to Ike Villanueva, who I guarantee would have won that fight if it would have been extended and not been a cut stoppage. So,
shout out to Daquan Townsend. You are better than Ike Villanueva, my friend.
Yeah, way better. So, I'm on the Todorovic side. I do like the fight does not go to decision here. That's juice. That's probably like minus 500 at this point. So, minus 600, something like that. So, whatever, parlay away on that. But, yeah, imagine if – I wonder what Jordan Wright by decision would be in this spot. That should be like – that should be the same – that should be the same as a draw. Yeah, I mean, it should be that plus 6,600. But, yeah, we're on the same side of this one. But
is plus 1,200 on DraftKings Sportsbook.
Should be way more than that. But, yeah. Anyways.
That's the best in the market. It's as low as plus 650 on Bet Online. That shocks me.
So I'm not asking you to be like a value boy better here, but you think Todorovic is way more past the victory. You think, would you rather be, if you had to pick a money line, gun to your head, would it be Todorovic or would it be that plus 170 Wright?
See, money lines are tricky because from a money line perspective, I would probably bet Jordan Wright here if forced to bet a side because I don't believe in either side. And I think that getting the plus money on a guy who
there's so many props here that like become their money line, though. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, and that's the thing that's tricky is like this fight has trap written all over it to me. But is the trap that people bet on Todorovic and then he gets smoked in the first exchange, or is the trap that people bet the under and he finishes him in the like latter half of the second round or the start of the third? These are the kind of things where I think about, where are they trying to get me? And so I didn't have a strong enough read here to pull the trigger on either guy. They're both very, think about this, like in terms of like counterintuitive. What if both guys, having been knocked out, are just like gun shy and come out and it's more tepid and they stand at range and, you could just get a longer fight than you envision. And I think that Dusko to finish is my prediction, right? If I had to say, I think this is going to happen. So, I think it happens more than 50% of the time. That's for sure. Do I get to 60%? Do I get to, I'd have to think about it a little bit more, but I think that overall, that would be the side I'd go with. I don't trust Jordan Wright as far as I could throw him. And I probably couldn't throw him that far. He's a little heavy, but I could throw him a little bit. And so I don't trust him very much. And I think that I would probably put more trust in Dusko. I had a big bet on him last time as an underdog. So, it kind of shows when there's that upside, when there's that plus money, willing to take a shot with that guy. When I'm asked to lay the chalk, that's where I was, keeping my distance. But I do think Dusko gets the job done here. And I think, talking about guys with their back against the wall, he's like the prime example here. Had a couple losses, had some UFC push when he came in. They're going to want to see him get back on the winning horse here if they're going to keep investing time, effort, money into his stock. He's a young guy. I think this is a bounce back spot. I think he gets the job done.
See, this is why I love you, Liam. This is why we're having a great time because you're willing to go all the way in, all the way out on Dusko Todorovic versus Jordan Wright. Nobody else wants to talk about this with me for more than like 30 seconds. So I'm glad you want to dive in and think about this from every aspect of it, just to help the people out in case they're thinking about, putting their money on either side of this one. Probably a good stay away. I am one of the people, I think I'm guilty of just like when I finished my tape study, I'm like, I don't have much action on this card. Then I looked at my notebook and I'm like, oh, wait a second. I kind of do have a lot of like diverse bets here. Probably just because I was bored. But yeah, moving on to a much more high-level fight here, a much more intriguing one, I think, and that's Askarov taking on Brandon Royval at flyweight. And this is another one of these spots where I really want your opinion as a grappler here, as a martial artist. Brandon Royval has good scramble ability. He's really like willing to make like unpredictable things happen. Just a lot of his fights end up not going to decision just because of that chaotic bundle of energy that he is. Askarov, a guy who had a lot of finishes before the UFC. Now he's just only decisions, 3-1 and 1 draw in the UFC. So, man, I mean, the UFC prediction would make me want to bet on Askarov here. He's got the clear wrestling ability. He's got the takedown, the top pressure, things that Royval struggles with. But will it go to decision? I really don't know. We got Askarov about -240. We got Royval right around that plus 200, which is right there, man. That's right, like at the underdog price where I would want to take the stab on Royval. But I found myself on the Askarov side just because of all of the great ability that just fits into the weakness of Royval. And not to mention Askarov's got not bad striking either, able to piece up guys like Tim Elliott, read his unorthodox timing. Kaikar of France, I think, just put on just a masterclass performance against him and managed to work his way back into the fight in rounds 2 and 3. I don't think Royval's that guy to mirror that game plan. What do you think about this? And what do you think about the grappling of both guys if this does go to the mat?
Yeah, this is one of the more intriguing fights on the card. Flyweight, I appreciate that. Thank you. But flyweight, it's a really tricky weight division, man. These guys are very fast and, hard to hold on to. I think that's something that kind of defines, Brandon Royval's weakness. Among flyweights, this guy's a lot easier to hold on to, right? They just can wrap him up, take him down. Now, that being said, he's not a pushover on the mat. He can offer up submissions. He can go for weird transitions. And he works at a really high pace rate. So he's going to keep going, like just throwing attacks up. But there are guys like that that just get dominated sometimes by guys that are position. They just move from one good position to another good position. They do it slowly. They do it methodically. And then when they get there, they're very hard to move from that position. they talk about like the old Gracies, step 1, step 2, step 3, and it's over. That's the way that the jiu-jitsu works. Like I do this, and then I do this, and then I do this, and then the match is over. It might take me 3 minutes. It might take me 5 minutes. It might take me 30 seconds, but I'm going to just move, and I'm not going to move backwards in the chain. I'm going to move forwards, and then it's over. I think that that's kind of what we saw from Askarov, and Kai Kara-France did a really hell of a good job hand fighting. I was at that fight live as well. UFC Columbus, shout out a lot of returning champions. I'm kidding, of course, but just returning fighters from that card, right? And I think that those fights, what stood out to me, man, the crowd was eating out of Kai Kara-France's hand. I could not fathom it, right? And I actually had the worst beats, both the worst beats on that fight. I got reverse swept on UFC Columbus. First event I ever went to in person, got reverse swept on the gambling. So brutal.
The competition prize was being there, but
exactly. I got to watch and yell at him, please throw the elbows.
That's crazy. That's how it went.
Yeah, and it's only happened to me twice, so it was just funny coincidence. But either way, I had bad beat city on that fight. Guess what bets I had crash? Askarov by sub plus 350 crashes on that fight for me. He had the back for like 5.5, 6 minutes. He's looking for the choke, and then eventually loses position, right? And my hedge bet was Kai Kara-France inside the distance plus 750. He rocks him twice, drops him all over the place, and doesn't finish. I was like, boys, you just like you teased me in both directions here. I just couldn't get a break on that one. But either way, I did feel good about the reads there, where I was like, man, Kai Kara-France, he's good on the feet. He's not that easy to put away on the ground. You can get him, but you have to do something to hurt him. You got to get him, a little jammed up, a little jazzed up mentally, because he's really not a pushover, man. He's a competitive guy. Royval, tough guy, good fighter. I bet Royval a couple times when he first came to the UFC, and again, I love those opportunities when everybody's saying, who is this guy? And I watched him and I went, this guy's a shit-eating wild man. He's going to go out there and try and guillotine everybody.
Those are the spots you look for. They're the best, man. Sometimes you only get them a couple of times, but you got to move on to the next spot,
Absolutely. And I think that, again, this is a fight I look at and I say, okay, Askarov is going to be the public side. He's got an Ov at the end of his name. The guy can wrestle. The guy can grapple. Both these guys have been set back before in the UFC. Right? Both of them have been hurt, dropped. Okay, so most of the things level out. But then the question is like, who's been out-grappled in the UFC? Granted, it was by a really good competitor, but I mean, it's one side. It's not Askarov. He was not getting out-grappled in the UFC. And every fight he's had has been extremely competitive. He's done a great job. I think that Askarov needs to finish a fight. He needs to go out there and get a finish. He needs to be decisive. He needs to show that he wants to find finishes. Because the fact that he's had a lot of dominant positions and not turned them into many finishes is a concern. The UFC, there's no beating around the bush. They like guys that finish fights. If you don't finish fights, you work your way down the card. Like they're very simple about it. Like it's one way to promote fights. They like knockout guys. Even if you're getting submissions, they're like, can you knock out one guy? Like they just have a certain way they like to promote these fights, man. And I think that that's going to continue to hold him back. The fact that he doesn't speak great English going to hold him back. He's deaf, unfortunately, but I do think that is a feather in his cap, right? He's got something unique about him. He's got something that they could promote, talk about. A fighter with a disability, overcoming
a little mini Matt Hamill.
Yeah, man, and he's really talented. He can really wrestle. He can really grapple, and so I think that that's ultimately going to hold Royval back here. I think if
what about Askarov striking? You
see,
like
that's the thing. I think the striking is just a lot more of an open question for me. Not in terms of who's more technical, but as you know, it's not about who's more technical in every fight, right? I think Askarov's a lot more technical. He throws a tighter jab. He's a little bit more, thoughtful in his shot selection. But then on the Royval side, he doesn't give a shit what he throws. He's just going to throw, and find something to land. And, okay, all right, so he's partially deaf. My man. But I'll say this. The spinning back elbow against Kai Kara-France, people will forget. He got dropped. Like, he literally got hurt with a shot, like fell to a knee and just came up with like a spinning elbow. The guy is extremely unorthodox. So could I see Askarov getting caught here? Sure. But it is flyweight. I think that's a little bit lower percentage in terms of him getting caught. I think it's more likely that Brandon Royval either gets caught himself on the chin and finish, or makes a critical error in the grappling and ends up getting submitted here.
And how many, like along those lines, I mean, how many times have you seen a guy get hurt, but he's got the wrestling in his back pocket to bail him out, and the finish never happens, right? You can tell he's rocked, and he's able to use that wrestling to recover, right, by getting the takedown, resting, and actually winning that minute, right, because he's on top, even though he's hurt. So that happens a lot, man. So I am on the Askarov side, and but yeah, it's a tough one. The money line's tough, right? Like, is this not lined sort of correctly? Like, I don't know. The glaring weakness for Royval kind of makes it that way, where it's like, man, plus 200 on Royval, he could make this really tough. He's so unpredictable. It makes you want to take that dog shot, but you're not that confident. So I don't know. I ended up on the Askarov side. But do you think all that talk about wanting to finish a fight, do you think Askarov is able to finish this one? How likely do you think that is, that he gets a submission or something?
I mean,
like that?
I definitely think it's possible. Just we've seen Royval get buzzed in the Schnell fight. He's been dropped. He's been hurt in a number of fights. He's a killer be killed style of fighter. And also he makes really, aggressive choices in the grappling. Oftentimes that's good. Sometimes that leads to really bad situations. And I think if you do something like trying to pull a guillotine, you might get your guard passed and never get it back. Against somebody like Askarov, he's just tight. He doesn't have as much looseness in what he does. And that could be a blessing. It could be a curse. I think that in this case, against somebody who is really tight, it's a curse. Against Kaikar France, they were both like, I'm going to gunsling. Okay, I have more dynamic gunslinging. I could do more things. I could put you in a guillotine. I could do that. So he was able to win that. This is a lot different. This is like, I could control you against the fence. I could take you down. I could probably strike you at distance. So what could you do to me? You got to spaz. You got to put yourself on the line. You got to hang your chin out there. You got to, make some really, dangerous choices in order to win the fight. I think he's going to have to take more risks. I'm talking about Royval to win the fight. Whereas I think Askarov could play a more controlled game and win. I think he could find the finish as well. I do think Royval has a chance to sub. I'm not going to rule it out in any fight. What if he buzzes the guy on the feet? Askarov takes a desperate shot. Royval's got a nice guillotine. He's got long arms. He's got,
he puts some good torque on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like it. Like,
and quickly,
why did I bet him?
Too.
Why did I bet him on the, these first couple of UFC fights? It's simple. I saw what he was doing to these guys. I'm like, man, that guy's got a funky guillotine. Yeah. I really like how he gets after it. That works.
You'll see him defend it. I've seen him defend, like, I think it was back in the LFA, like defends a single leg, and he's already torqued all the way on like a guillotine. Like, he's pretty slick and fast.
Yeah, and I think that could pay dividends here. But I do think Askarov, he's faced some good grapplers, man. Joseph Benavidez is not a slouch. Like, he's faced some guys that can really grapple and aggressively hunt their own chokes. And I haven't seen a lot of vulnerability. I just think it would have to come after, a really either a staggering exchange or just too much accumulation of pace and pressure. Because that's the other thing is Askarov did slow down a bit against Kaikar France. If you guys have ever held a standing body triangle for 6 minutes or whatever it was, it's completely exhausting. All your legs are going to be juiced after doing such an activity. I think that really benefited Kaikar France. I do think that, if you're in dominant positions, it's a lot less tiring. So we could just see Askarov be able to cruise here by getting some dominant top positions, the mount, the back, holding on to him. But I could also see him finishing if he gets those spots. So yeah, it's a really hard fight for me to, put a concrete, like this is, I predict this. I think it's going to be, Askarov winning the minutes of this fight. It will probably be a finish reliant Brandon Royval or a comeback reliant Brandon Royval. He'll need to win the second half of the second round and the third round. I think he loses the first round a pretty decent clip here.
Yeah, Blood Money MMA bets pretty much nailing it. Yeah, I mean, I like a lot of aspects of Askarov too, but the line does seem a little bit wide, So yeah, it's one of those fights. But the next one is, I can see what the next one is a co-main event spot here. Jonathan Martinez taking on Cub Swanson at bantamweight. We got Cub Swanson at, I think, like a month or two away from turning 39 years old. He's making his bantamweight debut. So this is a fight, Liam, I really need your help on making a decision betting-wise, because I researched this fight, one of the first fights I did, and I actually put a money line bet on Martinez at minus 170, 1.7 units to win one. And I feel like I've thought about this fight too much to really – I got it on a book where I'm able to cash out too. So I'm not sure if I should – I think Cub Swanson's got a chance here to finish the fight. I really do. And because I'm now that I'm noticing all of the defensive holes in Martinez's game, Martinez is right now like a minus 200 or so favorite over Cub Swanson, who's really climbing up the underdog price, right? Let me double check this. Yeah, minus 205 for Martinez, minus 220 on some books, plus 185, the best price you can get on Cub Swanson. I think he's got a chance. I mean, I think it's reliant on the, of course, the weigh-ins, but sometimes those are deceiving. Should I just cash out this bet on Martinez, man? I'm feeling like oddly, I never do this, but I'm feeling oddly like suspicious about Cub Swanson's chances here. Or should I just kind of amend this with like a Cub Swanson inside the distance? Knockout is plus 500 for Swanson. Finish scorecards equal no action for Cub Swanson's at plus money. You know, should I just insure this or should I just cash out that bet altogether? I'm so iffy about this fight, and I really can't wait to hear your opinion on this one. Do you think Cub Swanson's the guy here at 38 years old, a new weight class?
This is a really, really tricky fight.
Yeah, and it makes it so much fun too. But I'm sweating my bet here. So if you tell me, Liam, I will cash out the money. I'll put that Benjamin and then some back in my bank account here.
I hear you, man. I'll tell you this. I have bet on Jonathan Martinez once against against Thomas Almeida. He was plus 120 as an underdog there. Thought that was a good time to get involved. Laying chalk on Jonathan Martinez is something you will not catch me doing most of the time.
Dude, the Perez fight, man. I had him parlayed up in that fight. That was a sweat, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, man. And I think I might have bet or actually, no, I don't have anything on my Bet MMA. I feel like I remember betting on Perez in that fight. But either way, I do have a bet that I had on Zviad Ladzezvili. I was thinking to myself, man, this guy might come in, offer something. He was tired in 2 minutes. I was like, well, I'm throwing this ticket out, but it was a small bet there. I haven't tried to fade him a lot, but I did think that the Davy Grant fight was indicative of some potential ceilings. I would not be surprised if Cub Swanson's able to find the knockout here. But the problem is coming down to 135, I'm like, one, why? Two, like, does that mean he just like lost some muscle mass here? Is he a vegan now? Like, I have a lot of questions I want answered. No hate. I'm literally just curious to understand the career move. Then I'm also
because he just came off of a win, right? Over another tough guy in Darren Elkins, another age, a very equivalent matchup, but he got the finish very early in that fight.
Now, I will say this. The last time out, I bet Cub Swanson against Darren Elkins. I bet him to win by knockout. I was very happy with how that fight turned out. It was pretty one-sided. Now, Darren Elkins is basically like a walking punching bag. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but like the guy's defense is horrific. He is just good at throwing back and being aggressive and going for takedowns. None of that I thought was going to work against Cub. So I felt doomed from the start. Now that being said, this is a way different fight, because Darren Elkins can't really strike. Jonathan Martinez can strike. It's just that he can't really take a great punch back, especially at 135. He's done a little bit of bouncing from 45 to 35. The UFC in their matchmaking probably thought, hey, we'll get a guy for Cub who's also around the same size. He's a 35, he's a 45, he's a tweener. Maybe both these guys will feel the effects of the cut, if anything. So they're like, going to level out. But one guy's really old, and no offense, but it's just, I'm talking about fighting terms. And it's like 39 in fighting years at bantamweight is actually even worse than at featherweight. It's like, it's more questionable. And then I say to myself, all right, both these guys, questionable durability. The thing that I would really want to bet here is a fight to end by knockout, either fighter to win by knockout. I'm looking right now to see if I can find that prop. That's plus 150 on DraftKings, a book that I don't have access to, but I think that's the side. I think somebody's going to get knocked out here. Jonathan Martinez doesn't really push the pedal to the floor in all of his fights, but Cub Swanson's not really a guy who's here to party and, bullshit and laugh and joke. He's here to fight. He's going to come after him and swing. In my opinion, he could put him down, but I think Cub has shown some vulnerability. I bet him as an underdog against Giga Chikadze, who I then slammed Calvin Kattar as an underdog against and got all my money back. Shout out Calvin Kattar. But either way, I was ready to fade Giga Chikadze. And that was the first fight where I took the stab. I took an opportunity, and it didn't come through for me. But it also showed me, man, maybe Cub Swanson really is being used as a setup piece now for the UFC. Because like they've given him some very winnable fights. The Kron Gracie fight comes to mind, but it's like that's also a fight where think about their incentives. Like they're like, all right, we give Cub this fight. Cub wants this fight. He'll take this fight. He probably wins the fight. What's the worst that happens? Kron Gracie wins the fight, and now we can market and build him as, oh my God, this guy beat Cub Swanson. Like that's what they're trying to do with all these guys. Like they're just trying to place guys that Cub can beat. Cub can be competitive with. Cub's not blown out of the water, but they want the other guy to win in all likelihood. Daniel Pineda is the slight exception there. He was coming in from another organization, dealt with some PD issues. They probably didn't give a shit if Cub beat his ass there. But, I think in these kind of fights,
Cub is he's always been a highlight reel maker for sure,
wins and losses.
Yeah,
and
always.
Even the Jeremy Stevens fight, I remember it's like one of my early MMA memories. 5-round fight. He's throwing cartwheel kicks. He's like, it's one of my favorite fights. So I love Cub. I'm rooting for him. Wish him the best here. I just think fight to end by KO is probably better than investing in either one of these guys personally, because I think they're both susceptible to the knockout. And
what did you see that line at on DraftKings?
That's on DraftKings. According to bestfightodds.com. I'm seeing either fighter to win by knockout is plus 150 on DraftKings, plus 135 on FanDuel.
I'm seeing it on FanDuel right now. Yeah, plus 135. Yeah, that's I mean, I'm more on the opinion that I'm not sure if Martinez can knock him out. I mean, obviously the weight cut to 135 is certainly a red flag. It's certainly something to think about. But yeah, I think it's James. Actually, Cody from Blood Money MMA Bets just made the same point. Martinez can't finish anyone. He just has to win this, for 3 rounds. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of on that side as well. And I think it depends on who's taking center here. If Cub Swanson wants to take center and, Martinez takes the outside perimeter of the cage, you got Cub Swanson with his hands down, baiting him in, countering, using the slick boxing. If he starts feeling himself like he does at 145 often, he could easily run away with this and probably finish Martinez at some point. But I don't know. Yeah, am I right to have like sort of a hesitancy, wanting to cash this bet out, get my 170 back, and just watch this one? It seems odd to me. Or what do you think about the finish only scorecards equal no action for Cub Swanson? If you think this fight ends in finish, you might like that one. That's at plus money.
So the thing is, I could just see this fight easily.
But you could see
Martinez by knockout in the first 2 minutes. I can just see him coming out there and throwing a teep to the body. Like I don't think Jonathan's like this huge hitter or something, but he goes out there and throws combinations. He put together a couple of shots, one after the other. Cub's always been a little bit questionable to the body. I think if he gets body kicked in the early going at 135, I mean, Kevin Kroom, I thought was going to be able to take 3 punches in a fight at 135. He took 1 punch. He's like on stilts. Like, I can't imagine at 39 that this is a great idea for your health, to cut an extra 10 pounds. He's not a big guy. So, maybe this is all right for him, but I do think he's the bigger guy. So I think Cub has some early win equity, but how does his cardio hold up at 35, at 39, right? So catch both those, but it's like, yeah, at 135 pounds, at 39 years of age, how's his cardio going to look? How's his chin going to hold up? Don't know. How's his body going to hold up? Probably really questionable. And then on the other side, Martinez has a little bit of a questionable chin. I think he's proven he can fight 15 minutes just fine. So I don't think there's going to be any questions really about his cardio. But when have we seen him taper off and tail off and look a little bit worse and then get finished? When he cut to 135. So neither guy deserves your confidence, in my opinion. But if you put a gun to my head, say predict the fight, I think Martinez knocks him out. I think that's most likely to happen. But I also think that Cub knocking him out is in my realm of possibilities. Plus 150, fight ends by knockout. I don't hate it.
What about my hundreds? What about my minus 70 bet? Do I cash this out or do I let it ride? My gambling, Liam? Yeah. I can cash it out right now. I can just not even sweat it. I can do it.
I mean, the theory of positive EV would tell you to keep it, right? It's over minus 2 to 1 now, right? But then the question is just who. I would say this: if you identify another parlay buster on the card that you think is like a lot of people are going to play this, it's not going to hit, and that's going to bust all the parlays, that's fine. But I also just look at the line and I say, Jonathan Martinez a parlay buster this weekend? He's connected with a lot of other favorites. And this is part of the way I look at these fights. I look at it as a holistic approach in addition to just one fight at a time. And that's one thing I've just been thinking about. It's like Jonathan Martinez, he doesn't look so great at 35 either. Maybe both these guys are just super suspect. Maybe either one of them goes down in round one to just some crazy, exchange. And that's the kind of thing that would keep me off him as a favorite. But again, my prediction, I think he wins the fight. I think that the physical dynamics, you just look at the historical data, it would probably put you around a 65 to 70% win rate for fighters when there's this pronounced an age gap. If you sorted it by division, I think at 135 it'd be much more pronounced as well. So for all those reasons, I'd have to definitely lean with Martinez here. But
cash it out or no? Do I let it ride? This is you get a free.
I would cash it out and bet fight ends by knockout.
All right, let's do it. All right,
that's what I would bet personally.
All right.
Because then you're not even laying any chalk.
I don't want some crazy movement to happen after the weigh-ins. Cub looks like, good or not good, and then I can't cash it out. I'll cash it out. All right, thank you, Liam. That was very productive.
Dude, I feel bad though. If he wins in the first round now, in the first exchange now, I'm gonna be like, I'll talk my man off a gem.
Certain books allow you to do this, so I'm not hedging. I'm literally clicking a button that allows me to cash out a bet. So if the line doesn't move, Bovada allows you to do this on a lot of bets. If you've got a lot of money on it and the line does move, in your favor or against you, then the book will actually they'll chop down. Like say I put $170 on Martinez here. If the line moved like crazy against them and they think I'm going to profit, then I can't cash out all of it. But they let you do that up until 24 hours before the fight on some books. So right now I can literally go in and actually cash out all 170 and get that back. So thanks, Liam.
That's
I don't have to sweat
a sign
now.
That they think it's going to cash.
yeah, exactly. So, and there's sometimes where you can actually if you beat it, they beg you, they'll give you more money to cash out too. So you have that happen.
My Shavkat Rachmanov, they were trying to offer me so much money to cash that out, and I was like, nah, y'all keep that. Y'all keep that.
Right. So that's good. All right, you guys, we got 18 people still rocking with us, a little past midnight here in the Central Time. My boy Liam Picks Fights, my brother, saving me money left and right now. A really productive time. So smash that like, smash that subscribe, go in the description, and if you guys live under a rock in this community, you don't follow Liam Picks Fights already, go ahead and give him a subscribe. Check out his Patreon. We got the main event now, women's flyweight 125-pound bout between Alexa Grasso, the favorite, Viviana Araujo, the underdog here. We got about a little north of minus 200 right now. Yeah, minus 225, climbing up to minus 230 on Alexa Grasso versus Viviana Araujo at plus 185, plus 190. I like the Grasso side. I got a money line bet on Grasso at minus 196. A couple of units on that. I like her to win this fight. I like the 5-round aspect of this fight. And I think there's even a potential for a live bet after round one. If you're getting Grasso minus 170-ish, after round one, if she gets taken down, dominated on some control time from Araujo, I don't think that lasts. And I think the longer this goes, I think Grasso's got that cardio. I think she's going to be able to get on the inside and box up Araujo, who strikes very well at range, but if people get on the inside at close range, she kind of does not like that too much, falls apart. And I like the improvements from Grasso as well. So what do you think about this one? I'm thinking Grasso wins, and I'm thinking she wins by decision in most worlds here at flyweight. You got any bets in this fight, Liam? And who are you leaning on?
So no bets on this fight for me as of now, but there are a couple bets I had my eye on. I was waiting for the line to open up. I heard Magic MMA. I was listening to his show with my boy Andrew Gambas as well. So shout out to those guys, two sharp guys out there. And he mentioned the fight ends by sub was at a really nice number. And that was actually a bet that I had circled for this fight for two reasons, as a matter of fact. The first reason, there's a belt discrepancy, right? And so I say belts aren't everything, right? You see things on tape, you want to get a good feel for somebody, understand their game, but there is a belt discrepancy. We have a purple belt in Alexa Grasso taking on a black belt in Viviana Araujo. So Viviana Araujo is very strong, very physical, right? Brazilian chick. Normally these are the girls I like to bet on, by the way. I'll say that. But I don't know that she's got the cardio to go, right? And so for me, that's a little bit of an issue, because the one thing you'll learn, your first day in jiu-jitsu class, somebody might be real good at the beginning of a go, and at the end of a go, they're just holding on for dear life. They're just gassed out. They're looking for a breath. They're looking for an escape, a way out. And so if you give them that way out, you put them in a sub, they might tap even though they're better, because fatigue makes cowards of all of us. And, 5 rounds is a long time to be out there. Chael Sonnen has talked about it before. Not everybody's going to go 5 rounds in their career. Not everybody's built to do that. And Viviane Araujo, oftentimes is holding on to win in those third rounds. And I thought she made marginal improvements in that Andrea Lee fight, in terms of how she performed there. I bet her a number of times. I bet her in parlays and whatever, Roxanne Modafferi, number of fights.
Absolutely, yep.
Montana De La Rosa, I bet her against as well. And so when I see the big plus money tag, when I see a lot of people in the community all liking Grasso, it does make me say, I'm a little skeeved. That's the only reason that I didn't get to the Grasso side here in any way to this point. I'm going to wait and see what happens. I think the idea that, let's say the casual viewing public that maybe doesn't look at these lines a week out, 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out, they maybe look the night of the event, oh my God, this scary looking Brazilian chick, she could throw hands and she's plus 165. I'm going to put my money on the underdog. Sometimes that's the way it plays out, right? And you got to respect that on a card like this, where there's a lot less interest overall, right? UFC 280, we're having a different conversation, right? Everybody's involved.
Even this one, everybody's
looking.
The lines have been out for so long in this one. I think they ended up correcting itself in a lot of cases.
So, and think about it, where it's not even like, a line that, is being picked over by the general public. It's the sharpest guys. It's the guys that are sitting around, with their hands in their pocket waiting for another UFC to happen. And they just get to, carouse through these lines. And this is where you can find props. This is where you can find derivatives. This is where you can get full totals. It's like, you just have to do this card if you want to really bet on MMA right now, unless you're doing money lines. You want to bet money lines? No problem. You can go bet on UFC 280. But everything else is in limbo. You got to wait. So I think most of the market attention, especially for sharps this week, is going to be over here. Limits go up. This card ends. Like, we'll see the cycle start over again. But you're right. A lot of the lines here are very sharp. A lot of the lines here have been bet in the sharp direction, right? So you normally hear me coming out with a lot of underdogs. But this is not the card. Every card's different. Every card requires, you to be level-headed in how you approach it. Maybe a Jordan Wright wins. Maybe. Maybe a Misha Cirkunov wins. Maybe. Am I really willing to stick my neck out with hard-earned dollars and say, I think this is value? No, none of those jump off the page at me. I could see a lot of guys winning. That's why I'm not betting the favorites, right? It's like I'm not super uber but I just have to look at it as a long-term game. There's a couple bets I like. There's some proposition bets. There's a couple favorites I think could be wider. Maybe I bet some of those. It's like, that's how I approach this card, because that's what I thought was called for here. Especially, I got to it a little bit later. I'm looking now. I'm seeing the props start to open up market wide. That's for me when I can start to take interest, when I can see some exploitable lines, some discrepancies. And you're seeing, some of the sharp markets respect both these women's chance to win the fight by submission, right? You're seeing it's lower on sharp markets for Araujo to win the fight by sub. You're seeing it's lower on sharper markets for Grasso to win the fight by sub. I was there in person. She easily submitted Joanne Wood in her last competition. She almost submitted Macy Barber. And we're seeing that she's training. She's not just training MMA no-gi with a bunch of, women from the local gym. Like, she's out there and she's training in the gi. She's getting better at her jiu-jitsu skills, and it's translating to her fights. It's not something where we're seeing the same product every time. So I don't want to get wrapped up in the belts and say, oh, it's all about the belts. Like Viviane Araujo is the only one who could win by sub. Either one of these ladies could win by sub. You put yourself in enough grappling situations, exchanges, somebody could get submitted in this spot. I think both women would love to have the feather in their cap. I submitted this black belt, if you're the Alexa Grasso side, or I submitted this girl who just thought she was something in the division because, she submitted, Joanne Wood, who's on her way out. And now look at me. I'm the big star of the show. I think that most likely finish for both these women is the sub. I think that, you can either get the fight goes to decision. That happens oftentimes in women's MMA. But we just saw that with Mackenzie Dern and Yan Xiaonan. I bet a small amount on Yan Xiaonan by knockout. We're very close. She had a couple times. Mackenzie was looking off in the distance like, where's the bus? When's it coming? Like, there was a couple times I thought we had a decent chance. But, I think that eventually that bill's going to come due as well. We've seen a lot of fights go to decision this year, especially in the main events, especially in those big spots and big opportunities.
Are you talking in some Yanni the Greek recession to the mean terms here?
A little bit, but what I'll also say is this.
Liam the Greek in the house.
Women's MMA inside the distance, I've hit on a number of them, right? It doesn't always come through when you're, looking for an underdog, but oftentimes you could find a big favorite in women's MMA and everybody's betting that goes to decision. I'm like, guys, if they're minus 600, how big is the skill gap here? We have to start thinking logically. And in this case, we got a 70% favorite here. People think it's pretty foregone conclusion. Alexa Grasso is the better fighter here. And she should win more often than not. Okay, no problem. I'm not even going to dispute that. But then how does the fight play out? You have one side that's probably going to peak early, have some potential to dominate grappling and whatever in the early going with her strength, with her physicality. And you have another girl who's got better cardio in terms of what we've seen overall. I'd have to lean towards Alexa Grasso to win the fight late, Viviane Araujo to win the fight early. Both ladies going to be potent. I think both could land hard strikes on the feet. I think Grasso takes over on the feet, maybe forces out a bad shot, gets the submission finish. I wouldn't be stunned by that at all, especially in the later rounds when it becomes easier for somebody to find the way out. So for me, I think that the fight not to go the distance is somewhat interesting. I'm not going crazy on any of these, but plus 650 on the fight to end by sub, that on sharp markets.
That's still out there. That's on FanDuel.
And I'm saying on some sharp markets, they have just one girl to win by sub at plus 650. You see what I'm saying? So it's like you're increasing your win equity by so much, and it's still a big, wide plus money prop. I just don't hate that look. So that would be, for me, my number one target if I was going to play this fight. And, oftentimes when you're making bets like that, you just have to accept, like, I'm not going to win every one of these bets, but like, if I can exploit the long-term value of bets like this, I've hit, Chris Curtis fighting Brendan Allen. I actually had the wrong side. I think I put a tiny bit of money on Brendan Allen to win by knockout that night, but I had the fight ends by knockout. It was like plus 400 or something. It's like, you can find these spots where you say, okay, I don't trust either one of these people necessarily, but both of them have a chance to get it done this way. If I'm willing to take that shot every time I see it, I'm going to win money long-term because I'm getting big plus money. That's how I look at it.
I like the thought process. I certainly agree for sure.
And the ones I don't have that much confidence on, main event, co-main event, those are the ways that I prefer to target it. I'm like, I could see either one of these guys winning by knockout plus 150. Okay. I could see either one of these ladies winning by submission plus 650. Okay. That's the kind of thing that piques my attention.
And what kind of, not to get too specific, but like what kind of unit size would you be willing to sprinkle on these to win long term? Like for a plus 650, what type, like how much confidence are you willing to put on that? Are you putting a tenth of a unit? Are you putting a quarter unit? Like what kind of, what kind of investment are you putting on that over time?
I would say the biggest difference between me and some other bettors is I'd be more likely to put 1 unit or 2 units. Okay. And not every case, but just like over time, if I really think it's a valuable, profitable angle, and it doesn't fit the same for everything, right? Maybe for a plus 150, I'd cap myself at 1 unit there. I'm like, what am I really getting here? Not a huge ROI, nothing crazy. So don't want to overexpose, don't want to overextend myself. But let's say I think that something happens, 50% of the time, and they're pricing it at one of these huge plus money numbers. It's like, it's almost irresponsible to not bet a little bit more on that opportunity, because if I find a really good money line, what's the ROI? It's like, maybe it's a Victor Henry and you get this insane ROI. It's like, that happens how often? Not very often. Okay. Mm-hmm. So most of the time, if I'm winning on a UFC fighter, I'm laying slight chalk. That's the truth. Is I like the average winner is probably like minus 125, minus 135. That's just off the top of my head, but it's like, that's what you have to pay on average for a winner. So you can win a lot of different ways in this game. You could find, consistent guys that I'm going to bet every time and you could find valuable underdogs. You could find undervalued props. Derivative markets tend to be softer overall, right? They have more data on money lines. They have more bettors on money lines. They have more markets on money lines. People have that everywhere. It's the most commonly bet thing. So in terms of bookmaker information, number one, what really is the chance that the fight ends by submission? Well, God knows. It's like, I've bet on fights to end by sub that not one grappling exchange took place. You understand? So it's like, that's the downside in the bet. I can't predict exactly what's going to happen,
Sure.
but I bet into upside. That is my number one betting strategy. That is the number one thing.
You're finding spots that can't be popped into a common based model on a bookie, and you're finding these spots and you're exploiting them is what you're saying. So instead of my thought process, like this is very rare that this might happen in a women's flyweight fight that, they're going to get a submission more often than not. I'm thinking like quarter unit, and you're saying, no, I'll put a full unit on it because this might not come around again.
Absolutely. Saying, right? And okay. It's not always a, rigid basis, but basically if I think it's a really good bet, I want to get the win. I want to get like a nice win on my bet. I think of it more as if I'm going to bet a favorite, I'm thinking about what I'm willing to risk, what I'm willing to put out there and say, like, I'm trying to win this amount. So, all right, I'm willing to put this down. Whereas the underdog, it's almost an inverted strategy. I'm like, how much risk am I willing to take here? Because I think it's I'm betting into plus money because I think it's got a better chance than the plus money indicates. Yep. So now I'm saying, how much exactly am I willing to risk on this? Because if it's a plus 2,500, right? Long term, I'm going to win it like 4% of the time or whatever. It's like, even if I'm the sharpest guy on the planet, I'm going to win it 10% of the time. So if I bet one unit like that every time I have a bad run, it's going to be tough. If I pick my spots and say maybe 1 or 2 spots per card, I bet one unit on a plus 650. Well, now my ROI potential just went through the roof. That's the truth. I've had bets like Derek Brunson to win by sub plus 2,900. It's like 0.25 units, wins 7.9. It's just like these kind of EV moves are very hard to make. And they're harder to make when you have to get everything right. The way I bet, I don't have to get everything right. My biggest ROI by the numbers is on big underdogs. Why? It's because I get them right 34% of the time, but I'm willing to take the shot. And when I take the shot, I take the shot. I don't say, oh, I'm going to put a quarter unit. I'm like, I'm going to take a unit on what's his name? He's fighting on this card. Or no, he's not. Petrosky against Maximov. I'm not taking a quarter unit shot. No, I think he's the side. I'm going to take a unit. Dusko Todorovic, I face planted on that one, but I thought he was the side. He was plus money. I put 4 units. It's like, if I see something and I think it's a good angle and I think it's long-term going to win me money, I take a risk. That's what we're doing here. We're ultimately gambling. But I could face plant on a minus 150 and then say, shit, like what was my ROI there anyway? Whereas if I face plant on 3 plus 400s and then I hit one, we're laughing.
There you go. Yeah.
We're laughing.
Yeah. So you're down.
That's my strategy in a nutshell.
You're a couple steps backwards in that instance, but then you're more steps forward for sure. So you're coming out ahead. And guys, that whole speech right there was something that people are out here on MMA Twitter, whatever, charging on Patreon for just their picks. This is a real good example of why I got Liam on this show, because this is long-term strategy. We're not just betting one night to get rich. This is something that we're back. You guys are all in the comments. You guys are all subbed. We're week after week doing the same thing, right? So we got to do this long-term, right? Because we're not just getting rich one night. So very good. Thank you, Liam. That's a really good insight into things that, like, I'm taking notes on that myself, because that's something that I need to get into more, is exploiting those props as well. Shout out to Uncle Wheezy in the chat. I know he just ended his stream, Ask Wheezy. So everybody go check that out. He gives the very similar insight to how he bets as well on there. And this brings us back. Insane is bringing us right to the final part of the show here, talking about our top 3 prop bets so far. I'll kick us off with the ones I like. I do like the violent spots here for sure. I like that under 1.5 for Menifield and Cirkunov. The math speaks for itself, and to get that at minus 110, I think it might be up to minus 120 at most now. Man, I like that spot as well. I do like the under 1.5 for the Todorovic Wright as well. I think those guys are going to go to war, and one of them is going to come out the victor for sure. And I got to say, this one's a future one, but I like Joe Anderson Brito inside the distance. If you can get it at like minus 160 to minus 180 at the most, then I would like Brito inside the distance. So that's when you got to really snipe when that prop drops, since that fight was just announced on Sunday. What are your top 3 props, Liam? What do you like on this card? I know we just spoke at length about this plus 650 main event winner by submission. Is that one of them?
See, I haven't gotten down on that one yet, so I don't want to speak out of turn, but that is definitely something I would take interest in, potentially, and it's something that I'm going to investigate a little more. My top line notes basically said, look at what the fight ends by submission is. I think it's gone up. I actually think that they opened it a little lower. I think it's gone a little bit higher. People probably betting on the decision. So for me, it's almost a little bit of a wait and see approach that I'm going to take in terms of that prop. But some of the other props that I do like on this card, I mentioned Victor Henry inside the distance. I do think that's going to cash. I think he's probably going to finish the fight. They're baking most of his equity into that knockout. I think there's like 35 cents gap, something like that between the inside the distance prop and the knockout prop. So if you like the knockout, take the inside the distance. Don't get cute. Don't be silly.
The same thing as well. It wasn't that much of a discount. So, save yourself that option in case he knocks him out and then just locks up a sub, right? So,
yeah. And so the bet that I do have as well, and a couple people have shouted it out, so it's probably not going to cash. It's probably going to be the knockout, but I'm just kidding. I think that, this fight to end by sub is live, and I think Victor Henry could be the one to do it, right? Assuncao is a BJJ black belt. Again, belts aren't everything, right? When he gets hurt, he makes some reckless choices in the wrestling, gets put in a really deep guillotine, gets finished. Victor Henry can hit you with a guillotine. He can hit you with a triangle choke. He can hit you with some guard attacks. He's not easy to hold down when he's put on his back. He offers up good up kicks. Like, he does a lot of things that make it hard to be comfortable trying to get on top of him. And I also just think that the pressure, the pace could force out bad shots from Assuncao, predictable shots. And he could get submitted, man. Plus 1,100, open plus 2,000. A lot of respect came in the way of Henry by sub. I think that it's a sharp angle potentially this weekend. And again, it's a plus 1,100. What I think we're expected 9%. If we hit that 15% of the time, we're rich by the end of our betting career. That's what we're really looking to do. And for me, I take shots on plus 1,100s. They don't always cash. This is one I'm taking a look at. Additionally, you kind of talked about it. The Taira fight, a lot of people think it's going to go to decision. No problem. Don't hate on that. I just think it's going to end inside the distance. I think the under 2.5 rounds at plus 170 caught my eye. I think the fight to end by sub is like plus 330, caught my eye. I don't even want to give away another prop bet. I'll give that one away later in the week. It's not widely available yet, so I'm hoping that they release it on some of the square books at a better number. But I think that the last one that I would give is just that ends by KO bet for Cub and Jonathan Martinez. I think a lot of people are going to take the unders. I don't hate that look, but what I think is a knockout could occur right up till 4:59. So, I think fight doesn't go the distance is safer than the under 2.5. Probably a better long-term play in terms of what you're sacrificing in plus money. You might be gaining in win equity. So it actually might be a fair trade there because I do think Martinez to finish late isn't a horrible look. But I also could see Martinez finishing on the first exchange. It's like that's the kind of fight to me that has variance written all over it. But when's the last time you've seen either one of these guys aggressively pursue submissions? These guys like to bang it out and land big shots. For me, it's going to come down to the striking. So it's either going to be a greasy decision where, the plus 150, you're like, whatever. Or, you could really say, wow, that was easy money at plus 150 when, the fight ends in the first couple exchanges. That's how it feels to me. So I like the fight ends by knockout. I like Victor Henry to win the fight by sub. Just took a small shot on it at plus 1,100. And then the fight to end by sub in the main event. Those are my three.
I like that. Man, I got to say, just to answer Randy Fowler's question about I know we were talking about cashing out. You helped me. I'm going to cash out that bet on Martinez. I don't want to be on high blood pressure medication by the time I'm, in my 40s here. So cashing that one out. But yeah, so what happens when you cash out and what happens? Does it apply to parlays too? So like I mentioned, if the value changes and, you get less money back, for parlays, that happens more often because if you're parlaying like 5 things, the value on those is bound to change on some of those lines. So you end up getting less usually off the parlays if you cash them out. But sometimes they're the same if the lines don't move that much. That's on Bovada Sportsbook usually too. Usually the more money you have on those, sometimes I see they're more subject to change. Maybe that's just like a rounding thing. I don't know. But man, Liam, it's been awesome, dude. We went a couple hours on those 12 fights. This is a great way to kick off the 6-week stretch of UFC action. I'm just proud to have chatted up with you. Got a lot of great insight. And like I mentioned to you guys, you can see Liam's a genius with this shit, man. And he goes into detail. Even if you disagree with his pick, you can still learn something from his breakdown. So I put all of his links in the description, his Twitter, YouTube, and his Patreon. Check out all of that. And the floor is yours, man. Tell the people where you can be found.
Well, I appreciate it. It's far too kind. Thank you very much for having me on, man. It's an absolute pleasure. I think we both just share an affinity for liking to talk about these fights, man. And, they've kept me silenced, the UFC machine by not having any fights. So glad to get back out there. Glad to have some fights to talk about. Glad to have some fights to think about in terms of what's upcoming. A lot of great content. I know that I'm going to be doing a stream tomorrow night, so probably around midnight Eastern. You can look forward to that. Going to be cleaning up some of my thoughts here. Some of the fights I still have to do a little bit more tape study before I put my final stamp of conviction on. But, my man Patrick asked. It's an absolute pleasure every time. So, wanted to come on, share some thoughts with you people. I wish you guys all the best of luck on all your bets. If you're looking for more information from me, you can find it at LiamPicksFights. And in terms of the other sports, the major ones, I'm still learning. I'm still, a aspiring better in other fields, in other markets. But the guys at Delphi Sports, my business partners, absolute geniuses. Shout out Delphi Kamish, hitting at an absolutely insane rate on NFL sides. It's one of the hardest markets to beat, and he's been doing it. So peace, love, and chicken grease. I hope you guys check out all that great content. Find me everywhere at LiamPicksFights. And Patrick, my man, we'll talk again soon because the fights won't break down themselves, and no better person to do it with than you, brother. Appreciate it.
Dude, thank you for your time, and thank you for the 23 live viewers in the chat. It's been an absolute pleasure. For UFC Vegas 62, I'll have my best bets and props video out with all of my betting action, minus that Jonathan Martinez bet that I am going to cash out thanks to my man Liam. So, all right, you guys, have a good night. I will talk to you all very soon. Cheers.